Oh.
Here.
Is that yours, John, or somebody else's?
That's somebody else's.
You're not unfamiliar with that, though, are you?
I am not. My cousin texted me this morning to ask me how were things at my house.
Yeah. It looks like that could be real time, John.
That was what was happening at the moment.
Yeah. Was that this morning?
Yes.
Okay, can you still hear me?
I can hear you well. Yes, thank you.
And now there's no echo?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we see Jaron now. Hi, Jaron. How's Hawaii?
It's good. Surf's up.
When's it not?
Summertime.
How's Dad?
Dad actually has flu-like symptoms today, so we're hoping it's nothing serious.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
What kind of, is he running a temperature?
Yep.
Oh, that's not good.
Nope.
Well, keep us posted.
Will do.
Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock, and I like to start on time, so why don't we go ahead and do that? So I'm sure others will be joining us shortly. So thanks for being here. And so, John, you want to say hello?
So welcome everybody again to another session of Survive and Thrive in Times of Crises. I'm John Zink with the PHCC Educational Foundation, and we're very happy to have you here again for these great sessions that Kirk is doing for all of us. As usual, we're going to be recording this session, and if you are going to be sharing something, and we hope you do, just make sure that you're not sharing anything that you don't want to have as public information, because this will be posted in a place where people outside of this group can also access. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat box, so if you have any questions that you need to throw directly at me or at Kirk, you can use that chat to either talk to everybody or directly to each of us. And if you don't want to interrupt the flow with a question, there's a button in the console where you can raise your hand, and we'll keep an eye on that. And when there's a good stopping point, we'll cut to you so you can ask your question. Don't forget that this is a highly participation-driven event. So when Kirk asks a question, dead silence is the wrong answer. And we can't hug online or even in person anymore. But Kirk and I will figure out some way to get to you. So again, thank you everybody for being here, and we'll get going.
Great, thanks, John. And there is a rumor, I heard a rumor last week that there may be a mascot that has emerged. And so you may, in fact, instead of getting a virtual hug, you may get a brief virtual shot of a mascot. So those of you who have been in my classes have some familiarity with that. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so
question, Kirk, before we get started.
Yeah, go ahead.
You guys mentioned that these might end up getting posted to YouTube. Has that been done yet?
Yes. In fact, that's I'm going to show you where the link for that is here. And just thank you. So I'll second John, and so welcome and thanks for coming back. And like you can see on the screen here, it's entitled Contractor Discussion. So I think we did a great job last week of having excellent discussions, and it's about the opportunity for everybody to share what they're doing, and then also for all of us to bring tools to the fore to see how we can all of this. Okay, so this is the third session. So now we've had an introduction and 3 sessions, and so on this slide, I give answers to Steve's question a minute ago. So the points of contact to find the information there. If you wouldn't mind muting your mic, that would be great. Like somebody's dragging a body across the floor, but that just makes the video better. So, yeah, so you can see a link there. I have a Gmail address, kirk.survivethrive@gmail.com. So I do have a YouTube channel. YouTube channel that Steve was talking about, and there's a link to it. Or just go into YouTube, and I have a channel, and the channel is entitled Kirk Speaks. So if you were to go there, it's got that's the first 2 sessions. All right, mute your mics. That's Mark away from the computer, I'm not sure. Okay. All right. So if you don't mind muting your mic, that'd be great. All right. All right. Hey, Mark, can you mute your mic, please? Thank you. Well, it's not Mark. I'm hearing the Minnesota Vikings, and so if whoever has that on in the background, if you wouldn't mind muting. There we go. All right, good. It sounds like it was a football fan, so that's good. All right, so sorry for the delay. So there's a link for you to email things to me. All of you have been invited to Dropbox, and if you haven't been invited to Dropbox, send me your email address, and I can invite you. And also anybody else who's already in Dropbox, you can invite other people to Dropbox as well. And so then there's the YouTube link as well. And then finally is my my text number. And so please use whichever of those methods works best for you. I also post in Dropbox. There's a recording file, and so in Dropbox, you can also find links to the videos as well. Also in Dropbox are different folders and files with the PowerPoint presentations, and then last week we started to put some more tools in there, and we're actually going to be visiting additional tools that other people have put up since last week, and then whatever tools that we work with tonight, those will also be added to the Dropbox. So enough of the introductory type of stuff, just to give you an outline of where we're going tonight, what we're going to be talking about. Is I think it's useful to start each night with asking everybody how you're doing, because at the end of the day, it's people that matter the most. And then accompanying that is what's everybody doing and what's new. And so every week as this unrolls, new things are happening. So for example, right this second, President Trump is unrolling what the Opening Up America plan is, and so things come at us pretty quickly. So I want to know those things. Then we want to talk about other things that other people are doing, and I've had some good help with that this week with a number of you posting things, and so we'll talk about that as well. We'll talk briefly about the economy, and some of these things, of course, we'll talk about just a little tiny bit each night, some in more detail than others. And so what's new there? An ongoing list of topics and actions. And then tonight we'll get into and do an example of the risk management and the risk matrix that we began to talk about last week. And then I have a small case study on calculating cost because I'd promised last week that this week we'd start to talk about how to start to evaluate the costs that we're having because of both the COVID-19 procedures on job sites, but then also the project delays and things that we're experiencing, and how to start to hang some numbers on that. So, as usual, I'd like to hear from a few of you, and so about how you're doing and what's new. So, how's everybody doing?
Hanging in.
Hanging
Great.
in. Yeah. What's changed since last week with you and your company?
Um, Things have been a little turned for us for the better, I think. See a lot more of email activity. We're able to get some potential jobs, looking at different things. It seems to be better. We're able to call a few people back from unemployment. Seems like we're getting a little bit better on our social distancing and making, as a company, the guys are getting more used to doing the protocols and different things like that.
Good. How many were you able to call back?
We're about 8 to 9 right now.
Okay. Did you apply for any of that PPP money?
I'd have to ask Joe on that if we were able to get the loan through.
Okay.
I don't know if they how successful they were at that.
Okay. All right. All right. Good. Thanks, Dan.
Mhm.
What about the rest of y'all? How y'all doing? How y'all doing, and what's new in your world?
Um, for my world, we continue. We hear a lot of jobs being lost in the industry.
Yeah.
A lot of our competitors are downsizing significantly, including our company. And essentially, the next 6 to 12 months, specifically in the refineries and petrochemical market, it's going to be extremely tight. So companies there's I should say company senior leaderships now are disseminating information about furloughs
Is
happening.
that right?
Yes.
What kind of magnitude of scale do you think, Philip?
So on average, we've seen about 15 to about 20% each of the EPCs, the main large cap EPCs out there.
Yeah. How much of it do you attribute to, the COVID and that type of thing, and how much to just oil prices?
Well, it's actually, as we all know, it's kind of a double whammy on that side. And actually, before of all of this, some of the companies were not performing very well in these markets. We've had a couple bankruptcies in the industry, and it's a very tight, small. Although they're very global, these industries are very small. I should say these companies are very tight knit, so we know what each other is doing, and so as a whole, our industry was not performing very well. On average, our stocks from last year to this year, not just my company, but the competitors as well, have gone anywhere down from 40 to 70% of its value.
Yeah, so you're thinking 6 to 9 months, but it could be more. It could be more too, right? Yeah.
Yes, and the sad situation of this is we're in the past, as many of us in this industry were global, we could gravitate to a certain particular region to buffer from this. In this case, it's, as this pandemic has happened and the oil prices, this has resulted in just globally, as an industry, shrinking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Philip. What about Jeremiah? What's new with you? See Jeremiah on here. Talk to me, Jeremiah. All right, Jesse, how about you? What's new with you?
Hey, Kirk.
How you doing?
I think I have a accident.
You're-
I'm good. We're actually gearing up for what we think is going to be the opening, May 1st of Tennessee again.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of other companies furloughing and laying people off. So we've been looking at actually seeing if there's anybody out there that we want to acquire.
So how are you doing that? How are you going about doing that?
We have a couple people, our better techs are out there actually finding, through their contacts, seeing who's available, and some of the guys we've picked up recently from some other companies.
Okay. So when you say, so I think that's good. We talked about that a long time ago about, that's good strategy. Are you actually making offers to people, or are you making tentative offers to people, or how are you practically doing that? Are you actually hiring people now?
I haven't hired anybody on my team. I brought one back from being laid off.
Yeah.
But the service manager is looking at a couple of people. I don't know if he's offered him anything yet, but if it's something he wants to pursue, I know he's willing to.
Yeah. What about so looking at hiring, and so you mentioned the May 1 date, and of course that's the date that everyone's talking about now. What else are you doing? Anything else to prepare for coming out of this on that May 1 date?
I mean, honestly, we're truck maintenance, just trying to be ready, because the other thing on the service side is when everything comes out, or if they do release come May, everything we have is in an unoccupied status.
Yeah.
So when everything kicks on and the heat's here in Tennessee, I think there's going to be a lot of service to be done.
Yeah, there'll be this pent up demand, right? And then, of course, everyone's going to want it immediately. What are you doing to anticipate that, right? So part of it's hiring people. Is there anything else you can do? Anything else that you guys are thinking about doing for this pent up demand?
I'm not sure. I know that on some of our G contracts or our full covers, we're going to see if we can start staging things on, so it's not 100% demand on some of this bigger stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Thanks. So I see Jeremiah's back. How you doing, Jeremiah?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. So how are you doing?
Excellent. We're good. So I'm in Iowa, and our population is not nearly as dense as some of these other areas. So I don't feel like we're getting hit with COVID nearly as much as everybody else is talking about.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're throwing around is if we start implementing some of these policies, we're having issues getting like thermometers, gloves, face masks, hand sanitizer, and all that. OSHA, if you have a policy to provide that stuff for companies or for your employees, they can then say that you're not protecting your employees the way you're saying you're going to, and they could fine you for it. And so we're kind of in a rock and a hard place there, trying to figure out if we actually do post stuff stating that we're going to protect our employees, even though we can't right now because we can't get the stuff on hand.
Yeah. So that creates a dilemma, right? So the dilemma is, do we have, and again, Iowa, like I say, hasn't been hit very hard. Do we have a policy that we can't fulfill, and does that create risk, right? So that's the question. The other side of that question is, by not having a policy, do we create, so on the external side, do we create risk, regulatory risk, right, with OSHA? Of course, the other side of that is, do we create risk by not doing that, right?
Right.
So how are you making that decision?
I'm personally not. I'm in the conversations with the people that are. We are still attempting to get all this PPE, all of this, pretty much everything that you guys have been talking about and asking for, essentially. So yeah, I don't know. We're still posting the signage that the labor force is asking to post, and I don't know. I mean, that's
I think this is a great. We're going to talk about this later tonight anyway, so I want to open this conversation up. I'm glad you brought it up, but let's open it up. I'd like to hear what everybody has to say about this, because it is an interesting conundrum, and it's everything in business, of course, is about risk, and so let's talk about that. So we have talked a lot over the last few weeks about PPE and what people are doing. We've talked about gloves and masks and hand sanitizer and staggered shifts and all kinds of things. And we have, many of us, in fact, have implemented new safety procedures and policies, and I think appropriately so. But the issue that Jeremiah is raising is, are we now potentially putting ourselves in a tough situation with OSHA, because now we've set a standard that we're going to hold to, but then we can't. We don't have the PPEs. What do you all think about all that? And how, if you haven't thought about it before, let's do it on the fly and say, is there anything you should do in your companies about this?
So I'm pretty sure my client, who we manage their work on behalf of them, that's why they're just giving recommendations.
Yeah.
They're not stating this is mandatory or anything. They're just saying, yeah, we recommend you do this.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, you don't have a new necessarily policy, but they're making recommendations and trying to get all the PPE and everything as well, so they can kind of cover themselves and not get in trouble. Will or not they'll be successful? I don't know. But I think that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because of course, much of not all CDC's information is recommendations, right? So even at the highest level, it's recommendations. So yeah, so in some way, people I think are taking the position that by making a recommendation, like Steve says, you've mitigated some of your risk. But what do the rest of you think? Should this be a recommendation? Should the enhanced PPE requirements be requirements in your companies, or should they just be recommendations? I'll ask it even a different way. Are you requiring your people to have this PPE and follow these procedures?
Hey, Kirk, this is Nick Davis from MSD over here in Dayton, Ohio.
Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Doing good. Jeremiah, one thing we've really focused hard on is, the recommendations we have made requirements. What the state of Ohio has actually issued, along with the CDC. But before we actually roll it out, we try to look at all the resources available. So, for instance, for the face mask, one thing we were able to do, obviously, you couldn't just get online and order the face mask, but we're able to go to Walmart and buy 3XL shirts, and we're able to cut them into. We got eight face masks out of one 3XL shirt, and it's self-tied behind the head. So we're able to cut them up the side, and then you got basically 6 off the body of it, and then you cut the sleeves off, and that was one that you could slide over. So there was multiple different things out. We also were able to find additional face masks of cloth that go behind the ears. That was an additional supplement that we were able to add to that. But I think it's really important for companies to understand that, there's recommendations that are out there, and it's our responsibility to actually make those requirements for our organization to stay in compliance. The second thing is I was on a call today earlier, and we're part of a national peer group, and one client out of Chicago, what they came up with was they were actually hand sewing, taking the t-shirts and hand sewing face mask out of it, and then they were sewing pockets, and then you get your MERV filters, and they made pockets to slip the filters into the pocket. So then all you have to do is replace that, and then once a week you could go through your sanitation process and actually wash the actual mask, as there's more being supplemented. But I think that the creativity with the USA in general, the things I'm seeing out there, has just been phenomenal. The out-of-the-box thinking to protect the employees on the front line, I've been extremely impressed. Hand sanitizers, there's a lot of local breweries. If you check with them, A lot of them are making hand sanitizer. Now, most of it's for essential. They're trying to kick the healthcare facilities. But we've been able to tackle a little bit out of Columbus, Ohio, which is only about an hour from us. We're able to get a pretty good supply coming from them. We're trying to use all means and methods. I mean, we have a team. A couple of us are on the call here, but Brad Bradley, our construction ops. I mean, I think people are starting to settle and realize this is the norm. And we've been trying to be extremely proactive in our communication and making sure that we're all in this together. And I think it's starting to settle down and realize this is how we're going to approach our norm. It's obviously there's risk involved. There's a lot of liability involved, and the ultimate goal is to protect everybody. One thing we have seen is on certain projects, you still see, we've seen some masons that are still elbow to elbow, and our team members have taken that to the CM over the construction project, and it's being addressed, and only one crew in a certain area or multiple shifts, or so there's many different things we can do to try to protect our people out there, but that's some of the things we've done.
Thank you, Nick. I think all of that's really, really good stuff. And I think you're right. It's one of the really good stories out of all of this is that American ingenuity that we're seeing, right? And I mean, that's heartwarming. That's a good thing. Of course, it's driven by bad things, but not having supply and things like that. But it's good to see. So let me make sure. There's a couple things you said that I really liked and really thought was important. And so it sounds to me, Nick, like you as a company are approaching this is the new normal. Is that right?
Yeah.
What you look at. And so what does that look like? Say once supplies are back up and masks are available, things like that. How do you imagine your craft worker in the future is going to look like out in the field?
I think the 6 foot distance, where that can't be maintained, like right now, like when we go to hang a hood, right? So you're within 6 foot, or you got multiple different lifts out there. I think that it's going to be. I mean, the state of Ohio, Mike DeWine's done a great job. Trying to stay ahead of the curve. And one thing he's pushed is I think it's going to be mandatory mask for the unforeseeable future. So I think it's not going to be a recommendation. It's going to be a requirement. And I think the general population will be actually required to wear the mask. The problem is we have to think outside the box because the masks aren't available.
Yeah. I think you're right. And so I think in defining the future, first of all, a couple things. One, I think DeWine has done a great job. He was one of the governors that was really out ahead of it. And so I think he did a super job. And so when I think about the future, there's the COVID future, right? And so the COVID future is the next 9 months, maybe, right? 9 or 10 months or whatever. And so I absolutely agree that this will be the new normal and should be the new normal, at least till we get through however many waves we have to get through. It'll be interesting to see what will happen, 5 years from now. Will people still be wearing masks? Will this be just a typical requirement? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's definitely going to be a 6 month deal. I mean, we've all seen it in project management to where, anytime an issue comes up and it hits the surface like this epidemic has presented itself, fast, dangerous. So I think we're going to see a lot of different changes in our industry for months to come. I think that it will slowly start to die off as we continue to bend the curve as a nation, and that comes down. Then I think people will begin to be a little bit more relaxed. I'm going to push our organization to continue to stay aggressive on protecting our employees because there's just way too much liability involved with not protecting it. There's no family greater than any other family, and nobody wants to go and report that somebody got sick on one of our projects for somebody not following standards.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be 6 months.
Yeah. I think you're right. And as a minimum, I think you're right. I think it'd probably be longer. So talk to us about the culture of your company as far as both training and enforcement.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think as organizations go through this time, your culture is truly being questioned. How quick we respond to the guidelines. We have some team members that are in tune with the news and the media and trying to find the truth between the lines. But what it means is, I think for organizations to stand up and look at your true core values and look at that they know that you're standing behind them and we're all in this together, and that we have a plan and we're communicating that plan, and we've been proactive in saying this plan may change day by day, and in some cases it has, it's dangerous ground, but we're doing everything we can to push out making the recommendations from CDC requirements for our team members, for our organization. I look at a recommendation anymore as I just read requirement. I don't even process recommendation. But I think we've done a really good job with the 6-foot distance. Now I think we're going to be required to go to that next step, and it's going to be 100% mandatory. It's going to be just like your safety glasses.
Yeah,
we're going to have to cross that bridge as we get there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I appreciate this part of the conversation because we're going to focus on the new world of having to identify the cost of doing all those things, right? And so we're going to get to that a little bit later tonight. All right, well, I really appreciate those comments. I'd like to hear other folks' comments about the mask discussion. We'll just stay on mask right now, of recommendations versus requirements. So Steve has a very large client, and he talked a minute ago about how his client is mitigating their risk by just saying the recommendations. Nick expressed, as an owner of a company, expressed, nope, these aren't recommendations for his company. These are requirements. I fall definitely on that place. What about the rest of you? Are you looking at these things, especially mask in this example, as recommendations or as requirements? Where are all the rest of you at?
Kirk, it's interesting on the SARS situation. I happened to work for a Korean construction contractor that was doing a lot of jobs in the Middle East, specifically in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And as a result of the SARS, it became it became ingrained in their culture, that the masks and the PPE, it became ingrained even after the so-called news or the press that was still on SARS had subsided. And even now, I kind of check back with them to see if they got that culture, and they still have implemented it. And as a result, that particular constructor has not had many COVID issues.
Oh, is that right? Okay. So for their craft workers in the field, they have mandatory masks. Is that right?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. There was some issues with the cultural side of it in the Middle East with that, wearing those masks originally back in the first time. But they finally were able to make sure that everyone was consistently wearing those masks. So now they have it ingrained. So when this pandemic happened to them, they weren't as affected as much compared to some other contractors in that area.
Okay, good. That makes me think of a broader question, because as Philip was talking, I was thinking about culture, and we talked with Nick about culture. And so I want to talk about let's say the culture of the U.S. construction worker. How will we get the culture to change once this? Well, here's my concern, right? Here's my concern is that, what I've talked about a lot about epidemiology, and we're not going to talk about that tonight. And I'm concerned economically, of course, about all of this, and we'll talk more about that in other editions of this class. But I'm, I guess, moderately terrified about this May 1st date, and about everybody getting excited about this May 1st date. Anybody else in that same place?
Kurt, sorry to again chime in on this. In fact, it's interesting you brought that up. The project that I'm working on in South Africa, they have a May 15th date, but our CEO of our company has said to all our employees globally that that's an optional date of slowly coming back to some of these jobs work.
All right, so on your job, it's optional about slowly coming back. My gut feel in the States here and with contractors and with probably even more so with owners is is the opposite, right? In fact, I think President Trump just said a half hour, 45 minutes ago that some states may choose to come back early, even earlier. And I mean, what's earlier? Today's the 16th, right? And so we're only 2 weeks away from that date anyway. Is anybody, I mean, so I saw Nick raise his hand. Anybody else terrified about May 1st and the great unleashing? Or are you all? Yes?
The traffic's going to go back to being terrible.
Well, that is true. The traffic's definitely going to go back to being terrible. So, all right, I want to come back to the mask thing for just a second, though. So my question is that we're having PPE discussion, a safety discussion. Does the group as a whole here on this call think that on May 1 or whenever the company or the craft worker has decided that the danger is gone, I'm thinking the PPE of mask and the standard of multiple hand washings and things like that. I think construction workers are going to go right back to being what they were before if we don't really dramatically police it. What do y'all think?
Hey, Kirk, Nick in Wisconsin.
Nick.
A couple things. So Wisconsin actually pushed their date out till like middle of May for their stay at home. But to go along with the PPE requirements, what we have on job sites now, I think we still have the same bottle of hand sanitizer that was originally taken out there just because we're all in construction. Everyone thinks we're rough and tough. I'm not a little hand sanitizer on it. So until we can really change that, I don't see that ever really taken off, which is going to be our biggest trouble. You can push the face mask that everyone's going to wear, but at the end of the day, if everyone doesn't grasp that they need to be washing their hands, cleaning their tools, and trying to make everyone else safe, it's not going to take off. But I'd like to also hear with these added costs that are taking place with, the PPE and sanitizing your tools, how the subcontractors are taking that, and are they looking to be putting that into future bids and their proposals, and what their thoughts are going to happen when GC says, I'm sorry, can't give you this job this time because you're too high. Customers looking at the budget of this. So
yeah, and that's a timely question because we're definitely going to talk about this tonight. And I've brought a couple of tools along that we're going to use to do some of those calculations, and we will start to look at the cost. So the last question, I think, unless somebody else raises or has another one on this, on the mask thing, I'll go to the safety glasses example, right? Everybody on this call, I'm sure, has the safety policy of safety glasses 100% of the time. Yet guys violate that all the time. It's a two-part question. Do you think, like Nick does from MSD, and I do, that everybody ought to have a mask on and probably ought to have that mask on, probably through the duration of the year, or not? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not? And if you do, then how are we gonna make this happen? So I promise you on May 1st, let's say right now you have the theoretical job where every crafts worker out there has a mask on. And I've yet to see that. Where every crafts worker has a mask on. May 1st, you might be the only company that's requiring your guys to wear a mask. Can you imagine that could happen?
Yeah, Kirk, actually here in New York, we got a mandate for everybody that cannot socially distance, whether you are in public or in your workplace or wherever within 6 feet, everybody has to wear a mask. That's mandatory. And we also just got pushed out to the 15th today And given the politics in New York City, I would not be surprised even a tiny bit if that went to like June 15th.
Yeah. Well, and actually, to me, that helps. That actually helps a lot. And so, frankly, I'd rather be working in New York because you have a state mandate by a very strong governor, and it's not just construction workers; it's everybody, right? I mean, that's right. It's people, the man on the street, right?
Absolutely, everybody,
Yeah.
whether you're construction, going to the grocery store,
Yeah.
walking on a trail that is, you can't be 6 feet from something. It's everywhere, all of New York.
Yeah, and so I think for me as a business owner, that makes my life easier because it's easier to enforce because it's in every part of their life, right? It's them and their wife or their wife and the husband going to the grocery store or whatever. I think it's going to be, since it's state by state, I think it's going to be very, very challenging to enforce. Like we'll go back, we'll go back to Iowa, right? And so, like Jeremiah was talking about earlier, it would be my guess in Iowa that my guess probably in Jeremiah's company. Jeremiah, in your company, are you guys wearing masks?
No, not at all.
I wouldn't think so. So I'm laughing. It's kind of a black humor because this is a grand continental experiment in second wave epidemiology. So I guess we're all going to find out. So, okay. All right, so I appreciate y'all jumping in and contributing. That really helped a lot, and I think these are all important things. Let's add to your action items, right? Because every night you're supposed to have an action item list and add to it. And then I've asked people to go ahead and then put their action items up into Dropbox. I'm starting to get more traction with that, so I'd really appreciate if you did that. So I'm going to give you one to add for tonight, and it's this question about mask and PPE in general is, should we treat these as recommendations or should we treat them as requirements? I think that's a question you need to ask and answer. And then the second question is, as we move forward and as the various states with different time periods open up, and I was going to say whatever that means, we actually have an idea now of what that means. I don't know if most of you probably have not seen what that means yet. So let me go to that here just for a second. Stop sharing that and start sharing this. So the new guidelines that just got unveiled by the president at the press conference, president and his team at the press conference, called "Opening Up America Again." And so this is a brand new document. It got leaked yesterday a little bit, not quite in this form, but I think all of you should be aware of this. And so I won't go through the whole thing, but I want to get to the things that particularly influence construction and business. And so these are state preparedness responsibilities. Again, this is a federal outline, and so the states will take this and do what they will with it. But what I really want to get at is the proposed opening up. And again, the states don't have to follow this at all. Each governor will decide what to follow. And so what the federal government is proposing is a three-phased approach to quote, opening up America again. And so then there's guidelines for individuals, the things we've already been doing, I think. Guidelines for employers. And so on the screen there, you can see the federal guidelines, develop and implement appropriate procedures in accordance with federal, state, local regulations and guidance, and informed by industry best practices regarding. Frankly, I think that's a little bit of bullshit because I don't think we really have industry best practices, even on this call. Let's say we've got 40 people. We've been averaging about 40 people or so. We probably have nuance of 40 different, quote, company-wide best practices. And so we get the idea, but we talked last week about how people are doing temperature checks and things like that. And so I don't know that we have the uniformity that maybe we should have, but all of those things should look relatively familiar to you. And so there's guidelines, right? Then we go on, and now phase one of opening up America again in this federal guideline is for states and regions that satisfy the gating criteria, and that was described a little bit above. And so phase one, of course, the first phase, all vulnerable individuals should shelter in place, but that should raise lots of, that sounds obvious, but, and by now all of us should know what vulnerable means. People over 60, people with any pre-existing condition and so forth, pregnant, so forth and so on. But even in our companies, I think we still have some work to do as far as identifying individuals with vulnerable conditions. All individuals, when in public, should maximize physical distance. But now we're back to social settings of more than 10 people. And so that concerns me. Does it concern anyone else? Because that's where we were a month ago. And we went from 10 people to 5 people to 3 people. And so does anybody else have a concern about quickly going back to this number of 10, or is it just me?
I think it's depends on where you live and I guess how your state's doing and how they approach it.
Yeah, and of course that's the problem, right? The problem is that maybe what they're talking here in this phase one rollout is, I think it's going to send, and this is my concern about any kind of opening up, and it doesn't matter whether it's May 1st or September 1st. I'd probably still be concerned about it. Is that people tend to like to stretch the rules. I think we'd all agree with that. And so as soon as I see 10 people, I'm imagining a job trailer for a weekly job meeting with 10 or 15 people in it. And probably everyone can imagine that. And I don't think in any way, shape, or form that social distancing. So the number of 10 bothers me. Not essential travel, pretty much, I think, green lights anybody to go anywhere that they think is essential. Encourage telework, that's good, that's fine. Strongly consider special accommodations for personnel who are in vulnerable situations. It talks about what's going to open up and what kind of changes should be made. So it's saying that schools and daycares and camps should still stay closed. Still should not make visits to senior living facilities and hospitals. No large venue activity. Elective surgeries can resume. Gyms can be open. I thought that one was interesting. Gyms can be open if they adhere strict physical distancing and sanitation protocols. Is anybody else amused by that? I'm amused by that because, yeah. Well, I'll just ask that question. Is anybody else amused by that? I think that
I am. That's kind of scary if it's not.
Yeah, because if you're working out, you're going to expel fluids, whether it's perspiration or respiration. That one's just crazy to me. I don't get that.
Staph infection.
So I don't get that one at all, but they're going to keep bars closed. I think I feel safer drinking at a bar than I do going to the gym, but that's probably just me. So that's phase one. And there aren't dates on these, and that was intentional, is that, but this is, again, just guidelines for opening up America again. Phase two guidelines, of course, then it's going to open up even more, and so that's social settings of limited to 50 people or more, and so still not big concerts and those kinds of things, but for example, continuing ed classes or shopping and those kinds of things, and then non-essential travel can resume, and so that's of course the hotels and the cruise lines and the airlines will all be happy with that because we're getting into summer vacation season, and so that will be some revenue generation. Closed common areas and so forth. Then schools under phase two, schools can reopen. You can go and interact in hospitals and senior care following protocols. Large venues can operate under phase two, so sit down dining, movie theaters, sporting venues, churches, etc. And then bars finally can open in phase two. And then phase three would be the end of it all. So still take precautions, but pretty much everything is wide open at that point. And so that's That's the federal guidelines. So what are your first, if you haven't seen that, and it's really new, so I don't think that many of you have not seen that. What are your initial thoughts about the reopening plan?
I think phase one with groups of up to 10, but if you're doing that, you need to be wearing masks. If you're getting into that and still hand sanitizing everything. I think as far as the job site meetings that you were talking about, I've already expressed our very much liking the fact that construction has entered the 21st century with these Zoom meetings, and we need to keep that as a ongoing practice and stop wasting so much time driving to job site meetings that are just sitting there for an hour before they ever get to inside the building, that they're talking about the site work and the outside envelope of the building before they even get to all the MEPs that are sitting there for hours.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that's a great byproduct of all of this, because all of us have had that frustration where you go and sit in a 3-hour weekly job meeting, and if you're an MEP contractor like me, you sit there and your eyes glaze over as they talk about drywall and glazing and concrete and other things, and then there's 5 minutes left in the meeting. It's okay. Is there anything to talk about an MEP? I mean, that's always been a frustration. So I think that's one of the positive benefits we'll get out as people make the shift to embracing the video meeting, video conference. So I think that's good. What about the rest of you all about the 3 phases of the opening up? What's your first reaction if you haven't seen it before?
Kirk, it's John from Columbus.
John.
And I think it's just entirely too vague. I think they leave a lot of, wide, broad borders for people to cross. And I think that's going to probably contribute to the second wave.
Yeah. John, I certainly agree with you there. And to me, that kind of gets back to the first part of the conversation is, this is about us and our company making policies and then enforcing them outside of guidelines, right? And typically, like Nick was talking about earlier, is if our requirements are stricter than the guidelines, I'm okay with that. But there could be people out there that disagree with that as well. So. Anyway, so let's add another action item to your list for this week. And so the action item to add is you should probably go and visit those Opening Up America new guidelines have been rolled out. And then the homework part of that is you probably should address how you're going to address that with your employees, and then also what your policies will be during each of these phased rollouts. The other thing you should expect is that the various states will have probably more detailed, I would imagine more detailed phased rollouts and phased opening ups, and you need to pay attention to that depending on the state that you're working in. So, yeah, okay. So I want to go to now is I want to go to our ongoing and growing list of topics that we have from all of these discussions. And I don't know how comprehensive you've been or you are being in your thinking about all of the things to think about and talk about and create policies and procedures with. So as I was putting this together for this week, I was thinking about, okay, what have we been talking about so far? So I've got a few slides I want to show relative to that. And so while we're doing this, what I'd like you to do is think about each of these topics, and then also either shout out or put up in comments, put up in chat, or raise your hand or whatever about issues, or problems, or actions that you think you should be doing that you aren't doing yet on each of these topics. So mine is kind of it's not random, but it's kind of a stream of consciousness of things that we need to be doing and we have talked about or will talk about. So contracts, clearly, how to review them in light of additional risk. And we've done some work on that in this class. So how to review them in light of additional risk and how to quantify those risks. And we've come up with some language for some of those things. Has anybody here put together yet a comprehensive contract review checklist for COVID?
So I have I have actually done that, both on a commercial as well as contractual and productivity basis.
Okay. Now, Phil, did you? I forget. Have you posted that in Dropbox?
Well, I did some of it on that contractual side. Some of it, for obvious reasons, it's a publicly traded client that I'm dealing with, and so which we're managing their cash flow as well.
Sure. For
this program. So I couldn't share really that aspect of it.
All right, good. So we have some of that, and that's good. Still under contracts, how to review contract language to protect yourself. We've talked about that a bit. Understanding force majeure and its other names, and properly negotiating favorably. And we've talked a fair amount about that, and I've given you some sources and links and what have you. We haven't gotten into perhaps a role play example of negotiating that, but we will do that. We will get to that at some point. Proposals, we have talked about revising your proposals with some language relative to force majeure and pandemic type of experiences. But if you haven't yet gone back and looked at your entire proposal, including all of your standard inclusions, exclusions, allowances, and basis of pricing, you should do that. And some of the things that come to mind under basis of pricing is one of the things we always put, of course, under basis of pricing is our standard work hours. And traditionally, of course, our standard work hours, like most people, unless it's emergency service and repair, is Monday through Friday, excepting national holidays, from 7 to 3:30. And so that's always been in our basis of pricing. But now that we've gone to staggered shifts, now that actually changes the basis of pricing, because I don't want to say 7 to 3:30. Why not? If I left it as, would I like to stay at 7 to 3:30? Yes. But we know by splitting shifts, we have fewer craft workers on the job and in the spaces at the same time. But this does cause a potential rift or potential problem with your customer. What problem does it cause with your customer?
Most of them are going to have more overhead for the supervision for the longer hours.
Resounding quiet.
Well, as a GC, I mean, if Dan didn't put that in his contract or make a note on his estimate to me that there's going to be overage on hours or later time being, then I'm expecting he's working from 7 to 3. And if he's knocking on the door asking for more money because his guys are, off hours, I'm sorry, Dan, you didn't, give me that one up front. How am I supposed to go to the owner with it now?
Yeah, so I think, I appreciate. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dustin.
I was just going to say, so a lot of times, because we do hospital work, it's we understand that the working hours may be, regular hours or after hours, depending on what activity we're doing and at the hospital's discretion. So because that's written in our contracts with our general contractors, they are assuming that responsibility. Is how I see it.
Well, let me pull that out a little bit more. So the contracts that you're signing, Dustin, with your healthcare customers is at their discretion?
Ultimately, yes. I mean, for instance, if we put in for a shutdown and the hospital, says, hey, we have a certain window that you can do this in because of we can move the patients out if it's a Sunday night at 3 a.m., it's a Sunday night at 3 a.m.
Yeah. And we do a lot of hospital work, both new and renovation remodel. So same kind of thing is you have to do the work when during the time period that patients aren't there, docs aren't there, all that kind of stuff. But of course, when we're doing those kinds of projects, we build that anticipated cost into our estimate. So far, I think we're in agreement. Where I worry in the future, right? Where I worry in the future, and I always would be worried about the language is at the discretion of the customer, is that leaves me, well, unless they are 100% on the hook contractually for paying for all of the additional cost of that. Is that how your contracts are written, Dustin?
I would have to review specific contracts with outside of our healthcare work to see how those read, because I don't specifically know.
Yeah, good. All right, so there's a few issues here that I think y'all need to be thinking about relative to your proposals moving forward, and especially in the area of basis of pricing, and especially in the area of as a typical work standard workday. I'm very wary of letting the customer have the latitude, except for in the special cases like Dustin's talking about, because I don't want the customer dictating to me my hours, because it's impossible to estimate, right? I can estimate Monday through Friday, 7 to 3:30, but if it's wide open, I can't. But there's a couple of issues here. One is I will have additional cost, at least traditionally, I will have additional costs for working alternate shifts. But also, especially now in the time of COVID, I like the idea of working split shifts or staggered shifts. And so that helps me to keep my guys healthier, to keep fewer people in the area. But in addition to the extra cost, if we're paying extra cost for shift work, and we're not, then I could see the general contractor or the CM or the owner's rep coming back and say, wait a minute, if you're going to be working off normal hours, there's additional supervision cost for the general contractor. And they would be correct with that, right? Because they're not going to let you be on the job site without that. So I think that you need to think about changing your proposals to address shift work and supervision and cost and who's going to bear all of that cost. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. So does anybody have some really good language already on that that captures both of those things, or should we craft some? Not right now, but I mean over the next week. Should we craft some proposal language to address that?
I think we should craft it. I don't know what the others feel, but I think we should.
Yeah, I do too. And as I say, it's the royal we unless I hear volunteers, I'm pretty sure I'll end up crafting it.
And actually, it should be all of us together jointly looking at this.
I agree. So let's put this down as an action. And maybe tonight we can come back at the end and circle back and say, okay, do we have volunteers on who's gonna craft some draft proposal language? Now I want to get to, this could be one of the benefits of COVID is one of the things I've been talking about for a few years now is culture and millennials and attracting workers into the construction industry. And frankly, one of the obstacles to getting some younger people, now millennials aren't young anymore, right? So Gen Zers really we're talking about, but millennials are near, they're getting long in the tooth, so they're approaching 30. But part of it's the hours. Is there are people who just culturally, it's like certainly young people who don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning so they can be on a job site by between 6 and 6:30. And traditionally, the construction industry has said, well, that's just the way it is. And if you're not willing to do that, then you shouldn't be in this industry. One of the things I've been doing some things with is rethinking what a work day looks like on a construction project. And I think the old idea of 7 to 3:30 as the construction workday is an old idea that actually needs to go away. And I think we need to go to more of a manufacturing mentality, which is, why shouldn't we be building buildings in 2 or 3 shifts a day? Which, and I'm thinking about customers, that can help customers by getting their products in a more timely fashion, so that they're generating revenue. And so I think one of the outcomes of COVID could be completely rethinking about the work day and maybe even the work week in construction. And of course, with that in mind, where I'm going with this is by having multiple shifts or even I can't think of the right word for it right now, kind of an open block of hours from say 7 to 7, whereas the craft worker, obviously it has to be coordinated with teams and crews and all those kind of things, where the craft worker can work whichever 8 hours he wants to work, obviously within reason and teaming and all those kinds of things, and we'll do that without any shift pay. What are your what are your thoughts on that?
So some countries actually do that. They work around the clock on actually infrastructure projects.
Yeah, what comes to mind to me, of course, is the project that the video everybody's seen from the Broad Group, where they built a 30-story building in 15 days. So what do the rest of y'all think?
I think in America that one's going to be tough pill to swallow, just because. But I think really the big thing is if your GC can sell it to the owner and realize that there might be a little more of a cost just because of the hours on it, I really see that being beneficial. I mean, if you can put into perspective that I can have a nursing home open up in a month or 2 months or whatever it may be compared to a 6-month project, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm always, as a design build contractor, I've always been selling speed, right?
Right.
To me, this is just a next logical extension. But you said one thing that I'm not saying, which is I'm going to tell the owner, we're going to do this for you at no additional cost. Because my crafts workers are going to, you work 8 hours, whichever 8 hours, that works best for you, and you're getting straight time, period. That's not a business as usual approach to construction. And I think it has merit and could be coming soon to a job near you. And I think that could be a forward-thinking way of looking at this. Because remember, in the next months, you're going to have to be selling some bitter pills to your customers, right? And the bitter pills are additional costs because of COVID procedures and all that kind of stuff. I think we also should be selling revolutionary ideas on how to do this thing called construction. So I think there's some real opportunities. What do the rest of y'all think about that? Is this crazy talk or what do you think?
Kirk, this is Dave Fedden in St. Pete, Florida. I've been wanting to go to staggered shifts for a while, but it's more the GCs that are shooting it down, that they don't want to have the extra guys on the job. We've tried to go to 10-hour work days because we're more productive, and they've shot those down, that the rest of the people are there 5 days a week, and you're going to have somebody on the job. So it's more pushback that I've seen from the GCs. I think that definitely the younger generations want to work the staggered hours, like you're saying, but until we get some craft workers that are skilled to work the second shift, and most of the older guys are settling their 7 to 3:30 and want to get home for dinner and relaxing in the evening.
Yeah,
that's an uphill battle.
Yeah, it is. But I appreciate the comment too, Dave, and I appreciate the camaraderie, because I think you see it's a good idea too. I think it starts like anything else in construction or in any other industry, is I don't have to change the whole world. I just got to find one general contractor who's willing to do this with me. And I know we got a couple of GCs on this call, and I'm optimistic enough that I can find that general contractor, and then that general contractor and I can go to the end user, to the customer, and I think the customer will be all over this. And so I think finding the GC who's interested in going along is less problematic than your second part of your problem, your discussion, which is older guys who aren't, who've been in the trade for a long time. And you're right. I don't think we're going to get a lion's share of them doing that, but we might be able to get, and again, we don't have to change the whole industry. We just got to get a couple of skilled leaders, right? Skilled craftsmen who are foremen to do this. And I think that's how culture is. That's how you blow shit up. So anyway, so I just wanted to put it out there as food for thought for everybody. And I promise you, like anything else in life and in business, if we're having this conversation in this, relatively small group of 40 people or so, since we're having it, means other people are thinking about it. And so the question is there enough economic advantage to beat other people to the punch? And so I don't know for sure, but I think that's just one example of how you ought to be critically analyzing your basis of pricing and everything else in your proposal relative to that. And so we'll circle back to that, and maybe we'll put a small group together to attack just the whole idea of basis of pricing and how that might change on contract.
Hey, Kirk.
Yeah.
Say, just to play devil's advocate here, because obviously, I like to do that a lot as a GC.
Kind of look like the devil, Nick.
I know. I should probably maybe get it in my headdress there, huh?
There you go. Your beard kind of comes to a point,
So. So I guess in my eyes, I see it being more of the subcontractors trying to get them to rally around it. I don't see subcontractors jumping on board as much as everybody else. I mean, granted, that sounds great to me. If I can get a project done sooner, I just don't see how are you going to get the concrete guys, the masonry guys, the electricians, and everybody to play nice, and I don't see everybody jumping on board on that one.
So I have an answer for that. I think that's actually I like the problem you posed, because I like your perspective, right? Because we have different perspectives. As a sub, mine is right. But we have different perspectives. I think it's actually much easier from your direction because you simply write it into the request for proposals. This is this job will operate from 7 to 7 Monday through Friday, and from 7 to 1 on Saturdays, and that's just in the general conditions. And then, of course, the thinking would be from some GCs, probably not you, but from some GCs and some owners, is like, oh well, I'm going to get higher prices because of that. No, what will happen is 80% of the people bidding that job in the estimating piece of it will, in fact, add additional money for working outside of 7 to 3:30. But there will be 20% of the respondents who will say, okay, I see where they're going here, and now I have a competitive advantage by bidding straight time for that whole block. Does that make sense?
Yep. And then I would also go along and say, how many subcontractors read the general conditions?
Well, that's right. But then all you got to do is screw them a few times, and then they'll get it, right?
Right.
Or a few thousand times, and eventually they'll get it. I thought you were going to stop right there, and I was going to be insulted when you said how many subcontractors can read. But at least you continued that. So thank you for that, Nick.
Yeah, I caught myself on that.
Yeah, no, I think that this is something that is coming. It could be a positive outcome as well. And so put this down as a general question on your action item list: is that what are the big disruptive, and I mean that in a good way, big and innovative disruptive ideas that we can capture from this and really revolutionize this industry? Because I think there's lots of them. And that's how you're gonna thrive coming out of this. So.
Kirk, one of the things that you brought up is that it only takes a couple of the subcontractors to want to work the overtime or willing to do it, and it leads right into this COVID thing and being able to space the job out to where you have more stuff going on and you're staggering the crews so that you're not over populating any work area. So it's actually a positive thing. You almost don't want all the contractors. You have certain ones that work the early shift, certain ones that work the late shift. And of course you do almost like the police department, to where you have a rotating schedule so that somebody's not always on the second shift.
Yeah, no, you know what, Dave? I like that a lot. In fact, you've given me an idea. I just made a big note to myself, is that that's how we get around this. And so we got Nick, the GC here, and then Dave, Dave and I subs, is write this as a COVID SOP. It just then stays. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's interesting, this discussion, not on the construction level, but even on the management level. And in my case, my job sites are in South Africa, so I have tailored my time, my working time, to be the essentially the third shift time zone here. So I get busy with meetings and everything virtually from 9 p.m. up to about 9 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, so you've already made it. You're doing shift work because you have to because of the time. But I like where you're going with that, Philip, because this gets back to our organizations as well. There are plenty of things that happen in organizations that they don't need to be done from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever. So we do 80% of our work is design build. Why do my designers need to work from 8 to 5? I got a lot of younger ones, newly minted PEs and things like that, and BIM experts and all those kind of things. Well, why can't they work from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. or whatever, or 2 to 10? Why not? And the reason traditionally has been is communication, but we all can communicate virtually these days. I think this. So be thinking about all of those kinds of things, because the old world of straight time and a half, double time, maybe that needs to go away. That's not to say, I'm talking about shift work. I'm not talking about if somebody works 12 hours instead of 8 hours and so forth. Well, that gives us, I think, segue nicely into an estimating discussion. And so we definitely are I'm going to pull up some spreadsheets. We're going to do some things with this tonight about how to determine your lost productivity caused by COVID-19 procedures, and the new world of construction and the new world of the new construction safety procedures. And so we're going to start to put some teeth into that tonight. And then the second piece of that is how to calculate your lost general conditions cost. I had a conversation with someone this week. Again, we talk to lots of people every week, and so I forget who he was, but he was a contractor, and he was describing a job to me that he's on that has been delayed now by at least a month, and looks like it's going to be delayed for yet again at least another month. So that's 2 months of delay. And my question to him was, well, what are you charging for lost general conditions? And his answer was, I don't have any lost general conditions. I mean, the job was just shut down, but the trailers out on the job site was ours and the trucks are ours, and so we don't have any costs. It's like, and that's just not true. And so when I say lost general conditions, what does that mean to y'all?
To me, that means that that truck and trailer should have been on another job that was producing money, so there is lost revenue.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And so that's kind of general conditions 101. And so I've got a spreadsheet on that tonight as well that we're going to dig into. And so I want to make sure that we talk about that as well, and so we will. All right. So this is going to affect your estimating for maybe forever, but certainly for the next same conversation about time period for masks, 6-9 months or whatever. If you're not calculating those additional costs and adding them into your estimate, you're going to be making less money than you thought. Revenue projections we talked about in detail last week, so I'm not going to talk about that at all right now. I did put that spreadsheet into Dropbox, and so everybody has that. Hang on a second. Sorry, I'm going to move something on my screen. Okay, change orders and claims. We're going to start talking about that tonight a little bit. And so looking at calculating the lost productivity caused by COVID, putting a number on it, start talking about calculating your schedule impacts and how to make your case relative to schedule impacts, and calculating compensable general conditions on both change orders and claims. So we'll do that. So all of these things we've talked about a little bit. And so I just want to remind me and you of all the things we need to be doing. Strategy is the next big category. And so identifying your company's path as we emerge from this health crisis, and then we move into the economic crisis, or I guess the further economic crisis, I'll say. And so what does that look like? And so then identifying markets and customers, identifying what customers need, and figuring out how to parlay that into success. Identifying a comprehensive list of risk to your company, and then objectively ranking those risks, and then implementing the best way to mitigate them. And I've got a tool tonight for you as well on that we're going to use. Cash flow projections. I've mentioned them before. I talked last week about how they're definitely different from revenue projections. And I also talked about some charts and graphs and examples that I'm going to share with you, and then some action items that I think you should be taking in your company. I don't think we're going to get to that tonight because of the other things we're going to do, but then we'll get to it next week. And so properly projecting your planned cash flows in all your projects, understanding when you get positive, recognizing that often your typical cash flow strategies don't work well, in spite of the fact that you're wedded to doing them. Cash flow strategies in the time of pandemic, and then what are new cash flow milestones, and then like last week we talked about some things that owners are doing differently as far as, for example, joint check, what have you. We mentioned that a little bit last week. Some other things that we have talked about, and you need to continue to add to your list back at your shops, are all of the new SOPs you have for safety, going back to work procedures. Somebody brought up last week, and somebody brought up at the beginning of tonight about going back to work SOP. Has anybody done anything with that yet? Like a no. When I say going back to work SOP, what does that mean? What does that sound like?
To me, it's just, if you're bringing them back to work, is to go over your standard operating procedures that have changed since they were no longer there, to make sure that they're brought up to speed with what the guys that have been working, the guys and gals, craft people that have been working are doing, to make sure that when they come back, they're right in line with everybody else.
Yeah, go ahead. Somebody else.
Sorry. So I know we're working on it. I haven't seen anything yet, except for we're talking about potentially wearing, just even in the office, when we get back to the office, face masks during meetings. Is there a way we can stagger people in our office a little better, maybe for a couple months, or do we need to look at new space to keep people separated more long term?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I know those are the kind of things that we're discussing. And then one quick, just to backtrack real fast. My client decided today, I just got an email that they're staying work from home until the end of May.
Okay, the end of May. And you're with your client's the utility, right?
Yeah.
So end of May. Okay, wow, that's that's a big deal. Yes.
Yep, exactly. So just wanted to let you know. So I mean, that's a big decision. That's not just my utility, it's their parent utility as well. So
is that right? Who's the parent?
Exelon.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean that's another 6 weeks, and that's I have to laud them for that. I think that's I think that's probably the right move, as much as I personally hate it for me, but I think it makes sense. So I think your comments are good ones too, Steve. That probably many of us on this call haven't been thinking about, but masks for people in the office when you're meetings. It's it's just a little bit of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And then I hadn't really thought about the perhaps additional space. I think those are good things to consider. So I'm going to put that as an action item for the group too, is thinking about, and back to Dave in Florida too, is I think we ought to have going back to work protocols for craft workers, but also for office workers and things like that, because now we're going to have a mixture of behaviors where people are going to be trying to figure this out for themselves, and I don't think we should let them figure it out.
And as far as the job, how much is it going to cost to get another office trailer there?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're not that expensive to begin with. versus you getting another pandemic outbreak on your job site.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, office trailers are cheap. No, it's funny. It's the real estate that's hard to get often, but the trailers are cheap. Yeah. So no, that's a really good point, Steve. Thank you.
So pretty much everybody's going to be like Generation Z. We'll be standing 6 foot apart, but still on our iPads doing a Zoom meeting.
That's really funny, Dave, because it has me thinking immediately of creating that construction meme. I've got somebody on this call who I think can do that, and so create a construction meme about these all the construction workers and project managers with their mask on, looking at their device. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Also, just as a note for anybody who's on this call, if anybody needs masks, like the cloth mask, and you need a source for that, you can reach out to me because I've got a good source for that. So, but if you're interested in that, reach out to me.
Did you find new company logos?
Yeah, actually, that's right. We talked about that before. Yeah, it can be done with your company logo as well. So if anybody's interested in that, reach out to me, and I've got a source for you. So you know how to get hold. Everybody knows how to get hold of me. So as far as procedures, you have to have new estimated procedures as well. So you should be thinking about that whole list of procedures. Something else that we've talked about, I'm not going to talk about much tonight, is the effects of mass unemployment, what that looked like. We had, of course, the jobs report comes out every Thursday. Today wasn't quite as bad as the previous 2 weeks, but it was still, it was really terrible. 5.2 million. And so now we've got 22 million people, new unemployment claims in the last 4 weeks. And so we've talked a lot about training and hiring, so we're not going to talk about that. What has come up a couple of times is migration of workers. And so thinking about, will we have workers, mass migrations of workers going to the places where there are work? And the answer is a pretty unqualified yes. I'm still looking. I have not seen yet good studies, or what I think are good studies by McKinsey or any of those people about projections about that migration. But I'm making a note to myself here because it really is actually pretty simple, because if I just look at the state demographics of unemployment of the Department of Labor, we should see where the biggest ones are, and we should be able to figure that out. So I'm going to continue to look at that, but you should be aware of that, and it has impacts for us both ways, right? If you're in a state where that's going to have a lot of outbound migration, that's going to impact you on the other side as well. Technology we've talked about. We'll talk about that now. Supply chain, we're going to continue to talk more about that, and that was a big topic at the end last time. Insurance things that we've talked about and that you need to continue to dig into if you haven't is builder's risk in your customer, increased insurance cost, increased deductible cost, and how to get that into estimating as quickly as possible, and then how to communicate that to your customer just as quickly as possible. I think it should be part of our proposal discussion. I think that you need to add into your proposal a sentence or a bullet point that says there are additional costs for additional insurance costs, both in real time and anticipated, and those costs shall be passed through to the owner as they should be. But you've got to start letting your customers know. Safety, we've talked a lot about. There was a good analogy last week about how it compares to when OSHA was enacted. I did read a fair amount this week about OSHA and COVID and how they're treating it, and then I heard the president say the opposite. But the president doesn't enforce OSHA standards. OSHA enforces OSHA standards. So, do you know right now what OSHA's opinion is about COVID and an employee who gets COVID during a job site?
Aren't they treating it just like a regular infectious disease?
They're treating it as a recordable. That's their opinion right now. Is they're treating it as a recordable, and that's as late as yesterday. President Trump made the comment, I think, in a speech I don't think it was this week. I think it was last week, that companies don't need to worry about OSHA. In fact, that was almost his exact quote. Companies don't need to worry about violating OSHA with people who get sick with COVID. I can't imagine for a second that that's going to be true. And well, you tell me, what do y'all think?
Kirk, how do they know the origination of somebody gets sick? How do they know they came from the job site?
Yeah, Jim. So I think that for construction, so I'll go outside of construction for a minute. I think where this starts, because OSHA applies to all industries, right? Where it starts is in the hospitals, right? Is that we already have had doctors and nurses and EMTs and things like that come down with it, and they are saying that that's a recordable. I think in construction, so it's a good question, Jim, and I think it'll be. I hope it will be rare that this will happen. But for epidemiologists, it's not really that difficult to do the tracking. So I don't know that we're at great risk on this. But of course, the problem always is with any risk is one, right? That's all it takes is one. And one bad recordable negatively affects us economically, right? So they do contact tracing with all of the states are doing contact tracing, and of course that's how we're going to beat this thing anyway, is a combination of the safety protocols we've been following plus contact tracing plus the vaccine. But I'm relatively certain that if you had a guy who came down with COVID-19, a guy or a gal came down with COVID-19, I'm relatively certain that they wouldn't have a difficult time tracking it to exposure at the workplace. I'm very certain of that.
Kirk, question on that.
Yeah.
If someone came to work with the flu, gave the flu to someone, and that person died from the regular flu or any sickness that's transmittable at work, would this have already been considered a recordable?
That's a really good
for
question.
COVID-19?
Yeah, you know what? That's the right question to ask, Steve, and I don't know the answer to that question. I'll know by next week, though, because I'll look it up. I should have done that. I was so focused on the COVID issues, but you're right. That's exactly the right analogy. If somebody comes in with the flu and somebody dies, is that a recordable? I mean, probably everybody in the call's guess would be no.
Right. The question is are they enforcing a rule that's already in there, or are they writing a new one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think right now they're interpreting, right? And I think that's the key, right? I think right now that they're interpreting their regulations to make it recordable. And I do have a citation on that. And the question is are pandemics going to be treated differently than typical seasonal illnesses like flu? I don't know, and I bet you they don't know either. But I think it's a great question. I'll do the research and I'll come back with some things for people to read and see how they're doing. Because you're right, you can make an argument. You can make an argument that they're being inconsistent. Go ahead.
So I guess I've heard mixed reviews, though, that it's not a reportable with COVID yet.
Yeah. So no, that's back to the Dragnet response. Is that I don't have it in this PowerPoint deck, but I'll put it in next week's about a citation from OSHA that says they are.
Okay.
So I'll put that up because I don't think OSHA. Well, as of last week, OSHA didn't seem confused by it. That doesn't mean it won't change, right?
Right.
It could change because of pressure from the administration too. And so I don't know how I feel about that, but it doesn't really matter how I feel. The question is, the business question is, how are they going to interpret this? So, yeah. And the same is true, of course, not just on the job site, but in your office, right? And so this is, I think it's a relevant topic. We're talking about as we open up again and people stop working from home as much. Once we get into phase 2, or not even phase 1, people don't have to work at home anymore. And so let's say somebody comes back into the office and brings it. What happens there from a recordable standpoint? So I will get more information on that. So I'll do two things. I'm going to draw from a couple of sources. I'll draw from OSHA, but then that also gets us back into how the insurance companies are looking at this. And you can be sure the insurance companies are going to be looking at it harsher. I was going to say you can be sure the insurance companies are going to be looking at it harsher than OSHA. I think they are from an economic standpoint. I think it's going to cost us a lot. I think the COVID thing is going to cost us a lot more insurance money than it would ever cost us in any kind of fine or penalty for motion. So, okay, schedule. I talked a little bit about, and so things you need to be thinking about is impacts on schedules, durations, completions, all those kinds of things. How to mitigate COVID-19 schedule impacts. Talk a little bit about that tonight. Designing schedules for the post-COVID world, post-COVID-19 world. What do you think I mean by that?
Well, we've got one contractor that's kind of come up with a novel approach. Is he's created 8 different zones, and he's got the different trades working in different zones on the job site. So he's not trying to increase the hours or go to the second shift. Like I told him, between us and the electricians and the sheet metal guys, I said they can start and stop. We have to test everything we do. They don't until they either pull the wire through the conduit or they're putting air through the ductwork. So it's a little bit different. But that's how he's trying to go through and manage the projects right now.
Okay, that's good input. I like that. And so, that is an approach to scheduling and phasing. Anybody else experiencing anything different as far as scheduling and phasing that your general contractors are doing? Or Nick, are you? I know I've got a couple of GCs on this call. Are you doing anything different from a scheduling standpoint? You still with us, Nick? Did you go get it? Must have gone to get a beer. So I was thinking actually not just right now. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, hit the wrong button. Nothing really too different on the scheduling. The biggest thing is trying to stay in probably better contact with the subcontractors and make sure items that they need to provide. We get a lot of stuff. I know one project we had casework coming from Indiana, and that was shut down. So, just trying to really reach out more to the subs and just make sure that they're not seeing anything different. That's really about it. For the most part, a lot of our projects are still staying on the schedule that we've had.
Okay. Do you think your subcontractors are knowledgeable enough, and this isn't to denigrate subs, but do you think they're paying enough attention to things like supply chain and to their productivity issues and all that the schedule's not going to come and bite them in the ass when these things happen?
For the most part, I do. I mean, to be honest with you, your MEP guys seem to be a little bit more on top of the ball on that part.
That's always true, right? We're not carpenters, right?
It really hurt me to say that, but there are a few subcontractors that I think they don't really grasp the whole concept of it. But we just keep on pestering them, and then they've been really receptive of why we've been calling and asking the questions. So that's been about it.
Okay. All right, good. So I think all of us need to think about in the future, and this applies to when you're estimating too, is that when you're doing your pre-construction planning and you're building your pro forma schedule, well, you all tell me. I think we're going to need to consider, and I hate the word float in schedules, but I think we're going to need to consider building some bandwidth for future events like this that could come. Does anybody agree with that?
I mean, do you put in float for a hurricane?
Well, see, that's the right. That's the right question. And the answer is no. But should you, right?
So does it qualify as a force majeure? If yes, then you shouldn't be planning for it. If no, you should plan for it.
All right, so now this is the right question, right, Steve? So this gets us right back to force majeure. Is it still force majeure when you should have anticipated that, for example, there's a hurricane season in Florida, and as a result, you should have anticipated the possibility of that. Now, what that possibility looks like is a whole different question as well. But I promise you, if I'm an attorney and we're in Florida, and a hurricane hits, and I'm an attorney for the owner, and a hurricane hits, I'd probably thinking I'm not going to cut you a lot of slack because hurricanes hit in Florida in the summer. Now, I think this is going to be an emerging set of case law that we're going to see in our industry. And I promise you that this time, for the most part, I think you're going to win your battles relative to disruptions and additional cost and those kind of things legally. Should it get to legal? So whether arbitrator, litigator, mediator, I think you're going to win and the owners are going to lose because this really was so completely unexpected from an industry standpoint, not from a science standpoint.
So
I don't think we're ever going to have that excuse again.
So are you going to also build in costs?
See, that's the thing. Is
if you have time for it, then you should have cost for it. Otherwise, you're not doing a good job.
No, I agree. I think it has to be time and cost, and I think then that starts to feel more to me like contingency, right? And so I certainly wouldn't bury it in there. I would expose to my customers. Here is the schedule. Here are the schedule contingency and the cost contingency that I have built into the schedule. Now I'm back to basis of pricing, right? And so here I am here's what I built into my cost and my schedule for contingency. And then I can give deducts for both cost and schedule that the customer has the opportunity to go ahead and take advantage of those deducts. At that point, if they take the deducts, then my risk is mitigated because I exposed that I had extra time and money in there. And as with all owners, sadly, not all, but most owners, we all know what happens to contingency the second we identify it to a customer. What happens?
They take it.
They take it, right? But
yeah,
I'm all about
used by whoever uses it first.
Yeah, but I'm all about risk management, and so I don't give a shit. If they take it, that's fine. Once I identified it, now should the pandemic 2 come down the pike during the middle of that job, I can go right back to my proposal, which is incorporated in the contract, and say, hey, I allowed 30 days and $300,000 for pandemic contingency, and you elected to not take that, or you took it and you elected to not allow me to keep it. Therefore, you're on the hook for everything. I think that's a really good argument on my part, and I think I'm covered. And I think you need to be thinking about how to build that language into your proposals and your estimate. What do you all think?
I think what's your insurance going to say?
Yeah, well, I think that. Well, let's take it a piece at a time, right? Come on, I'm trying to come up with solutions here on the fly, right? So, just in general, from a proposal standpoint and mitigating your risk as the contractor. What do you think about that as a tactic or a ploy? Anybody?
If I had that written in my contract to the owner, I'd feel pretty safe with that. Okay. But as a subcontractor writing it to me, on the other hand, that's kind of where I was hoping to push the blame onto.
Sure, no, and I get that, Nick. But of course, me, I'm always trying to be the conciliator between generals and subs and get us to recognize we're on the same team, right? And if there's a villain, let's make it the owner, right?
I still got to play the typical GC for you here.
Of course. But our job is really not a villain. Our job is, I think, the biggest job we always have to do. Our job is to educate the client, always.
So, Kirk, in your scenario here, where you've identified it, let's just say you have a month and $100,000 for this risk.
Yeah.
What happens when it goes over?
When the job goes over?
No, when you can't go to work for 2 months. You evaluated the risk. You put $1 to it. The owner agreed. Are you going to be able to go back and get more time, or are you going to be on the hook because you misidentified it?
No, that's a really good question, and to me, that's a much easier question because that's a typical delay question, right? And so because of the contract language that I'm going to negotiate, and that I wouldn't accept a contract unless I agree to that language, is that I would not make it open-ended. I would say, for example, let's say 30 days, like you said. 30 days and $100,000. And so the way I would identify it is I have a maximum of 30 days we'll call it float, 30 days of float built into my schedule and $100,000 of contingency for any, and this we're using the pandemic as the example, for any future pandemic events that could cause work interruption or delay or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Any required time, cost above that does not fall within this proposal or therefore this contract and is purely at the risk of the owner. I'm pretty sure I can write language that would protect me.
Yep. No, I agree with that.
Yeah. So I'm not getting. So I wanted some of you who haven't responded to respond to your, did that make you go, thinking about your proposals and how maybe we should be qualifying, built into our language, some float and some cost to cover these additional risks and pitch that to the customer as, hey, this is to protect you. Now you can do whatever you want with it. What do y'all think about that?
I like it. Like you said, I mean, to get back to my norm, to make sure that my subcontractors and I are working as a team to ultimately get that end product for the customer. And if we're all on the same page and trying to make sure that we're all covered, I mean, like you said in your classes, if you going high and you are at what price you think you need to be at, and you get turned down, it wasn't a project that you needed in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to move on from schedule now. And so the economy, I'm not going to talk about the economy tonight other than the jobs numbers. We'll do more with that later and how to do the. Yeah, go ahead.
Have you seen anything with bid bonds and performance bonds being implemented with this?
I haven't yet, and I haven't done any research on that. So, but I'll make a note here to find out, what's the latest and greatest state of the art there. Yeah. Have you?
I haven't seen anything. I mean, the last project that I actually just sent out, we didn't require bid bond or performance bond. So, and we haven't really had anything that's went out the door recently. To be honest with you.
Okay. Has anybody else seen any changes relative to that?
We just got a bond for one of our projects, and we've got another one coming up, and our bonding agent said there are changes being discussed out there, but he didn't elaborate.
All right, so Dave and anybody else who gets any information, again, the purpose of this program is as soon as anybody gets any information like that, if you could put it into Dropbox in your folder, that'd be great, because I look through all of those folders every week. And there's been a lot of good stuff. Most all of it came out of Ohio this week for some reason. But the Ohio guys are all over it. So thanks, shout out to the Ohio guys. So the future. So again, this is just a list of topics and actions. The future. How do we prepare our company as a company for future pandemics or second wave? What lessons are we learning? Which of the new companies and job site SOPs that have been incorporated will live beyond the crisis? And how's that going to affect all of us? What mergers and acquisitions are going to occur in our industry and affiliated industries? And how's that going to affect all of us and pricing and all those kinds of things? Again, we'll talk more about that stuff later. Marketing and sales, identify what you value most in a post-COVID customer. We'll talk more about that next week. Identifying the potential customer pool, those that match your values and your needs, identifying what problems and challenges they have and how you can help them solve those, and then getting really, really good at selling. And all of that's for future stuff as well. Owners and GCs, how can we all help each other or not? How can we work together to help educate the client? And then we already talked a fair amount about safety tonight. So and that list grows, and I don't know. And part of the reason I wanted to put that list together is the amount of change and things that that we all have to process on is phenomenal right now. And we have to do this and we have to do it well. And so I think it's useful to have a list of the things you should be thinking about doing. So I do want to give a shout out to the folks that are on the screen here today. And these are people that really gave me a lot of meat and posted a lot of stuff. Last week, it was Philip, and Philip put a lot of stuff up, and it was a few other folks. And this week, Bradley with MSD, and Nick with MSD, and Jim Nair, John Hutchins with Vaughn, and Nick Hanko all put a lot of stuff in there. So I'll give all of you who aren't those 5 guys an action item is to poke around. All of the files are available. Poke around a little bit in Dropbox, and you'll see a lot of good stuff there. I wanted some of the MSD stuff to go up, but I think I'll come back to that because I think I'm going to ask you to talk about a couple of those things, but I think we'll come back to it. All right. So some questions that were asked about and risk and opportunities, and so how do we creatively maximize utilization of the PPP loans? And how many of you, anybody here on this call, their company receive a PPP loan? I know there was somebody last week who did, and I know how much you got. Anybody on here get a loan or know whether you got a loan?
Yes.
You did? Okay. And that's Justin. Okay, good. So you got. All right.
And it was funded last Friday, actually.
Good. Did you get what you wanted?
My calculations in the banks were off by about 10%, but it was still just under $500,000 in our case.
Okay, good. All right, so let me ask this question, Justin, because everyone that and this is not because of me, but everyone I worked with that was pursuing them got them, and got them like you said, Justin, within within a bandwidth of 10% or so of what they asked for. Now, of course, everybody knows. I think everybody knows that all that money's gone, as I promised it would be, and we'll see whether or not Congress and the president are going to release any more money. I think they will, but that's uncertain at this point in time. So now I'm going to put you on the spot, Justin, since you answered. What is your interpretation and or what is your bank telling you as far as the rules about that money? Because there are a lot of people that are confused about that. I don't think it's confusing, although it could be the banks are confused. And so what are your what are your understanding about the use of these funds?
Well, first and foremost, it has to be used for payroll or benefit fringes, any payroll related expenses over the next 8 weeks is my understanding. So it was funded on Friday. And our payroll hit our service on that Friday. So in our case, that was a $60,000 payroll. So that counts towards the portion that could be forgiven, I suppose. But also no more than 25% can be used for lease or utility payments. I'm still unclear on the. My understanding is you got to keep your head count the same, and you got to. It's going to be equated right to the dollars that you use. Is that a fair assessment?
So part of it is, and part of it isn't. All right. So that's good, and that's why I brought it up tonight. Is that there's a fair amount. I don't want to say confusion, but I guess confusion is the right word. I guess confusion comes from the fact that it's written it's clear how vague it is. That's the best way to put it. It's clear how vague it is, and so a big piece of this comes back to what can be forgiven, and I think that's how for most contractors that I'm listening to, not all of them, but many of them, kind of articulate it the way that Justin did, is that it all has to be used up over the next 8 weeks. So it all has to be used up by June 30th. So June 30th is the date that everyone's pegging. That's not quite right. And I think it's important that it's not quite right. And also there's some confusion about all of the things that it can be, how creative you can be with the use of it. By creative, I don't mean cheating the system. I mean using the system like you would with any, say, tax law. And so I think that one of the pieces that people are missing is that, oh, you have to use all of this up by June 30th. No, it's the forgiveness piece is about June 30th, right? And so I think that's an important distinction. I still, let's say I got $10 million. So I think the thing that people are missing is, and it comes right back down to the calculation, right? So the calculation is that what's available is the lesser of $10 million or 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, right? And so 2.5 months is 2.5 months is 10 would be 10 weeks, right? So I'm sorry, it would not be 10 months. So it would be 2.5 months your normal payroll. So logically, it doesn't make sense that if you applied for the maximum loan that you would be able to spend it quickly enough, especially considering the fact that work has tapered off. And so that really isn't the intent of it. The reason the 2.5 times is there is to build some buffer in. And where this, where the 8 weeks is going to come into, at least right now, although there is a rumor that they may extend that past June 30th, is it just really affects the forgiveness. But my comment to that is, well, so what? If I borrowed 10 million and only spend, and only 6 million of it can be forgiven, I still have a low interest loan for $4 million. And so, so what I've got on the screen here, let's see if I shared it. I did. I've got a couple things that I'll post into the folder probably tomorrow sometime. And these are articles, and then also I'll post one from the SBA about this. And so you all know about eligibility if you applied for it, but then, how forgiveness works. And so I want to put a couple of pieces up there on forgiveness, what you can use it for. And so most contractors I'm talking to tend to be thinking about it, well, it's just straight payroll cost, but it's also about retirement benefits and things like that. And so there could be some opportunities for you to think about, are there other ways to use this money? And so the piece I've got up right now, and I'm just flipping between pieces, is this is one on PPP loan accounting and tips to do it right. And this is a pretty good piece by a group called Evergreen Small Business. And so I would encourage all of you to read this because it talks about how you should account for this. A couple of the companies I'm working with on this have set up have opened, separate bank accounts, and I think that's a good idea. Accounting for it completely separate, I think that's a good idea as well. And so there's a number, I think there's about 6 tips or so on how to account for this properly, how to look at owner compensation. And again, there's issues there about whether or not you're an LLC or you're an S Corp or a C Corp or whatever. And so you need to follow the rules, but you need to be creatively maximize your return. But then the other reason I'm going to post this one is there are a whole bunch of blog post responses here that are really useful and worth your time in looking at if you got one of these loans. So I would encourage all of you who got these loans to, the thing that worries me the most is what I'm hearing the most, which is people saying that, oh, I have to use all this up by June 30th. In fact, someone I think last week made the comment or posted to me, I forget which, that they've thought about going to customers and giving them a reduced labor cost so that they can spend the money. Please don't do that. Tell me why I say please don't do that.
You're taking the industry backwards.
Oh yeah, I mean you're killing the whole industry in doing that. You're setting a really bad precedent for the whole industry, and also you're going to make less profit, which is probably the most important reason. So please, if you got one of these loans, do the homework, read the articles that I'm going to put up tomorrow, and make sure you have a clear understanding. And also, I would argue, please be careful about listening to your CPA or your CFO, you need to own the homework here, and you need to make the decisions. And I promise you, there's far more latitude in these, in the terms and the covenants of these loans than you think they are, or perhaps even than your bank is telling you. And so I encourage you to do your homework on that. But the most troubling thing to me here, I'm hearing from people, is I have to spend it all by June 30th. That is not the intent of this. It's definitely not the intent of this. The other thing is, well, so anyway, read the articles. Since it doesn't apply to everybody on here, I don't want to spend more time on it than that. I pulled these right off of someone's questions that they had posted, and I forget now who it was. And so I concern that they have from now through the next 18 months is the dip in the economy. They say they've got enough work under contract to sustain us for the next 12 months. And we continue to work on those jobs over the next 12 months and follow with adding new jobs, the backlog to not significantly suffer. And so we'll talk more about that as we continue in discussing about the economy and your sales and marketing. And then Jim, I think it was, made the comment about service operations and how presently about 20% of their revenue is service. How do we improve operations and ramp up quickly enough to grow that sector of our business? And so any thoughts? That was you, I think, right, Jim?
Yeah, it was Kirk. Yeah.
Good. So I'd like to open the floor to that. And so I know we've got a pretty mixed bag here as far as people on here. So those of you who are my service contractors and those that do more service contract, what are you doing to ramp up? Because without question, there is pent-up demand that's being built right now. And that will be the first thing that's going to break loose when we break loose. And so what are you doing in your companies to prepare for that pent-up demand?
Allocate more revenue to advertising in our budget.
Okay, and so
as one piece of that, we already have a service department, but to keep everyone working at capacity.
All right, so allocate ad revenue to make sure that you have at least the capacity that you need, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that's good, because that's getting at the problem of keeping the guys that you have busy. I think Jim's question was even taken to the next level is, for example, if we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I think Jim's question is if we're doing 20% of our revenue right now on service, and if new construction starts are delayed, as we know they will be, how can I quickly go from doing 20% of my revenue as service to 40%? I think that's your question, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it is. And it was probably more so an internal question, I guess, to myself. I recognize it's been something I've been trying to grow for a while, and we're doing okay with it, but I think this is the opportunity that I need to spend more time there and figure it out.
Yeah. So any thoughts from anybody out there as far as how to dramatically pull that lever and shift your allocation of work?
Yeah, Jim, this is Nick Davis from MSD, just up the road from you. Got a lot of respect for Ken Nyer Plumbing down there. But I'll tell you, the thing that kind of has me freaked out a little bit is all these buildings that fall outside of the 188P that don't necessarily have those routine flushing plans. They got their master mixing valve sitting at, say they're pushing out 120 degrees per the IPC code. We're in jeopardy in these facilities. And then you got your thermostat mixing valves at every endpoint. You're getting back down to 120. So I posted some articles in there. I just encourage everybody to read them because, our kids are all out of school, and, I don't think the state of Ohio is going to go back. I think we'll follow suit with the state of Kansas, who's the first one to actually call school for the year. But when you think about these schools and these office buildings and, these facilities sitting vacant, and Purdue University, and I'm sure Kirk was behind that, but at least I give him kudos for it with Brad. But, they're doing the studies right now on the actual minerals that are just locked up in these pipes. And what does that do when those break loose? Or, worst case, they connect to a host, they grow for a substantial amount of time, and then they break loose and they get clogged up in the strainers. And that's the water that our kids, that's the water that our family members, our friends are actually consuming. So I've challenged our sales team with reaching out and saying, this is a minimal service cost to protect the health, and that's what PHCC stands for.
Absolutely.
So let's focus on reaching out to these clients and saying, this is minimal cost. Let's come in. We can help you with the flushing. Let's verify your master mixing valves, what you're pushing out to your building. Let's make sure that you're pushing above 122, because at 122 the Legionella is going to actually become stagnant. It won't reproduce, right? Which is key. But a lot of these facilities are producing 120. And then furthermore, on the SAs, we have our sales team calling ahead, because like typical dispatch, right? They're going to call and they're going to schedule the SA, and then the client saying, well, we don't have anything. We don't have anybody in the facility right now. Or they're going to, worst case, they're going to say, you know what, we have a cash flow issue and we don't want our service contractors in here. So one thing we've done is, we've tried to reach out, and in some cases we've been successful with them actually giving us keys to the facility to continue to do the routine maintenance to keep the SAs going. But just being a little bit more proactive on the water quality side, because everybody's so caught up in, the COVID-19 epidemic. There's going to be a lot of things that our business is going to see in the long term that's going to be very costly.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on for all kinds of things. One, the most important thing is protecting the health and safety of people, which is what PHCC is all about, which all codes are about. And so I want to point people to a couple of things. And so one is protecting people. The other one is creating work. And so both of those are good things. So I'm gonna click through 3 or 4 slides real quickly and then take you to a tool. And so I did have some people respond back, because I'd asked all of you to come up with a list of 10 of the biggest risk facing your company. And so you're going to see these lists in a different form in a minute. And so someone gave me this list, and I appreciate that. So potential lawsuits, protecting our employees, etc. This one I think came from Nick. And so what Nick was, I know it's small here, but that's okay, because like I said, we're going to come to another tool in a minute. And what Nick was just talking about just a second ago was number 4 here on this list. And then these are the links in blue that he was talking about. You can't read them right now. It's not my intention for you to read them right now. They are in the PowerPoint. They're also in Nick's folder in Dropbox. And so these are all really good links and tools. And so a number of people did respond with those kinds of things, and I appreciate that greatly. So I encourage all of you to keep doing that and keep giving me those kinds of things. Keep sharing for all of us those kinds of things, because it just helps all of us. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift to kind of the tools piece of the night. I'm going to reverse the order of those, and so let me pull this one up first. So I'm going to give you a tool, and this is a tool that I've used for a long time in my companies, and it's a risk management tool. So it's a risk matrix, and so I want to walk through with you the how it works, and that'll only take me a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to have us do this live as a group, and you'll see. What I'm going to mimic for you is how I think you ought to do it in your company as well. I also think that if you really think through this tool, then you also can use it with your clients. And I think it's exactly what I'm going to do with you right now is what exactly I think you should do in your company for thinking about prioritizing, and then also with your clients and thinking about risk that they have as well. So let's go to the far right. Everybody can see this. I'm sharing this Excel file. And so we'll go to the far right now, and in columns H, I, and J, I have my scoring rubric, if you will, that says for each of these things, I'm gonna have you rate some things, because let's say we're all in the same company now, and so the options are very low, 1 point, low 2, moderate 3, high 4, and very high 5, and then some descriptions of how to decide whether something's a 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. And so if we're looking at column F, which I've highlighted now, That's the impact of this risk. And so if it's negligible impact in strategic outcomes, it's going to have a 1. If it's low, it's moderate impact. If it's a 3, it's substantial impact on members or financials' health. If it's 4, it's substantial impact on members and financial health. And if it's a 5, prevents accomplishment of our strategy. If we look at probability of this risk, well, then that's just like it sounds, is how likely is it that this risk is we're going to incur this risk in the normal operations of our company sometime in whatever time period we're looking at. So if you give it a 1, if it's highly unlikely. 2, if it's most likely it will not occur. 3, if it's possible to occur. 4, if it's likely to occur or has occurred in the past. And 5, if it's highly likely to occur. So now you understand the rating scale, and so we'll fill in the probabilities score and the impact scores in a bit. And of course, that's going to give us our overall risk score for all of these risks. Over here on the left in columns B, C, and D, it just has risk numbers, and then the risk event or condition, and then the risk description. And so now you've seen how the blank one, what the blank one looks like. I've given you score definitions, and also I've color coded it by points. And so when you multiply the impact times the probability, that's going to give you points. And so let's go now to the risk that I had people give me. And then I want you as a group just to give me, just shout out what the probability score is for that thing, and you can use your company and the impact. And I'm just going to record them, and then I'm going to show you what to do next so that you can fully utilize this tool in your company. So just humor me, and we can do this relatively quickly. And so I just want you to humor me and we'll go along, and then I want to mimic what you should do in your company. So the first one is the risk is diminished communication both internally and externally because of the stay-at-home orders and lessened physical interactions. And so potential communication gaps between creating potential exposure. First of all, what's the probability on a scale of 1 to 5? Do this quickly. Come on, just stream of consciousness. This should be an easy one.
3.
Okay, I'll put 3 down. I think you all are nuts. I think that's already occurred. I think it's really high probability. That's okay.
Probability is happening.
Yeah, so probability is a 5. I think we've all experienced that. So that's a 5. Now, so then what you're saying, then the impact would be a 3. Yes.
Correct.
All right, I can go with that. All right, so let me click off of here because it's interesting when you're sharing screens, sometimes it likes to give you shit. All right, so now I'll come back here and I'll change this to a 5. Actually, I've got it reversed. This is the probability is a 5, and the impact is 3. Back here. Sorry, I have to go off like that, but sharing the screen, for some reason, it does that. All right, so as long as I don't make any mistakes, we'll be okay. The next one is, and this was the one we were talking about a second ago, service represents X percentage of our business, and it's seen the largest impact so far. What's the best way to grow the service? So the risk is potential loss of service and maintenance contracts due to lack of cash flow from other sectors, churches, et cetera, requiring us to grow into other sectors. And so just give me a probability.
If you're a service contractor, it's 5.
Okay, all right. So we'll say that's a 5, and then on the impact, give me an impact.
Depending on how much service, I'd say it's going to be a 4 at least.
Okay. All right. So we got a 5, and this is sadly, sorry, I've got to do this, but it is what it is. It won't do this when you're working on it at home. It's just doing it because we're sharing screen. Heightened PPE requirements require additional PPE equipment and supplies. Are we providing adequate supplies? And so have we provided adequate safety materials and training for coworkers. And so the probability, that's got to be a 5 again, yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then the risk on that, the impact on that, what do you think the impact is?
Through the roof.
Does everybody think it's a 5? Do you think it's a 3 or 4? A 5? Okay.
Well, I think from lost productivity plus overpaying for stuff, it's definitely a 5.
Okay. All right. So that's a 5 and a 5. Are we giving the right advice to our customers to assist them in protecting their workers, occupants, and systems? And this gets right back to the conversation we were just having with Nick about what does the customer have health risk or future contamination risk or other product? It could be contamination, it could be any kind of risk. What's the probability of them having risks that they're not aware of?
5.
Okay. We're gonna have to come up with some 4s and 3s too, or this is all gonna go to shit. We gotta make some decisions somehow. What do we think the impact to them is relative to that?
3, because stuff gets brushed underneath the rug.
Yeah.
Okay, until people die of Legionella.
Until somebody, yep, exactly.
Okay, all right, that's fair. All right, so when stay-at-home orders are lifted, should we plan on masks being 100% mandatory? Blah, blah, blah. We talked about that earlier tonight. So now, considering the varying implementation and adoption of safety practices, how do we know what the right ways to proceed? What risk are we assuming? And so what's the probability of that? Of there being confusion and uncertainty and multiple types of adoptions?
I would say a 2, but
okay.
Globally, I mean, I'm not too sure. We have the experts here at North American Construction. Maybe they speak better to that.
Okay. What about impact? What do we think about impact? Is random, what I would call random re-entry going to cause much impact?
It's all good until you have a lawsuit.
Yeah. So what do we think?
4.
4. Okay.
Why are we considering it random if we've changed our onboarding and rehiring SOPs?
Do they feel safe?
So yeah. So my question. That's a good question. My question was really more about the industry than about your company. So in your company, yes, when you're doing this yourself, you need to do it for your company and just for your company.
I don't see it being that highly likely to be implemented, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't either.
As an industry standard, I would say it's more of a 1.
Yeah.
The impact or the probability?
The impact is a 1. I would say the probability would be more of the 4 range.
So yeah, and so I would agree with that. Actually, I think the probability is very high. I think we're going to have complete randomness. I think you're going to be in all kinds of job meetings with project managers, and nobody's going to have a mask on, like Steve was talking about. I think the probability is a 4 or 5. I actually think the impact is going to be something like a 3 or so. And so you get the idea. I'm not going to continue with the rankings because I'm irritated about going back and forth on Excel. But I do want to go through the questions for you to think about, and of course, for you to add as many as you can think of, examining the risk in your company. And so, project extensions. What's the risk of projects being 2 different types of extensions? One, either projects being postponed. That's one type of project extension, and the other type is projects being delayed. All the costs. I think the probability is a 5.
Yes, on both. Yes.
Yeah. I think the impact.
Probably 5.
Yeah, impact's also very, very high. All right, so I'm not going to read all the rest of these to you, but I'm going to encourage you to read all of them, and you can revise them and tweak them however you want. But I came up with, through a combination of things that you all gave me and that I took all the things that you guys gave me, and then I added some more. And so for your company, then of course, take this matrix, go through this and talk in your company about how likely do you think it is this is going to create a risk for us. That's the probability. And then even if this risk occurs, and we do in fact experience it, then what impact do we think it's going to have on the company? And so go through that process, and then just go ahead and take all of this data. Whoops, I need to capture one more. Go up here, and then just sort the data, right? And so go from B to G, like I'm doing here. And then go up to data, right? And then we're going to sort it on G. And I'm going to stop sharing it for a second so I can sort it. It really doesn't like executing when it's being shared. So let me do that real quickly, and I'll pop it back up.
Hey, Kirk, while you're doing that, I think it's number 25. You have workers traveling on that one. And it's just interesting to see that because we've been seeing a subcontractor on one of our projects who has guys out of Illinois.
Yeah.
He won't go back.
Won't go back to Illinois?
Yep. And they said, we're staying up here. Every time you go across the border, they're pulling you over for random stops just to see what you're doing. He goes, we're staying up here, so the more work you have, we're willing to do the work because we're not going to drive back to Illinois right now.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see. I think we're going to see more of those kinds of things, which clearly could have impact. All right, so now I'm going to thank you for that, Nick. And so now I'm going to reshare this because I've now sorted the data. And so now let's say you had done this in your company. This then allows you to objectively evaluate what your highest risks are, a ranked order on down to your lowest risk. And so in this example, this little example, and we did a few of them, you can see that we've got two of them, the service piece about, how do we increase our service, and then the PPE piece are the top two things. Well, then that's how you should allocate your resources, both human resources and financial resources, and then diminishing scale from there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So do you all see any utility in doing something like this?
In my company, we do something like that all the time, and we take it a step on assigning contingency percentages, and that's what we do our pricing on.
Yeah. What about the rest of y'all? I'm 100% sure that most of you don't typically use a risk matrix for making these kind of decisions. What do y'all think about doing that?
I see it being a tool.
Say again?
It's basically bringing a Dave Ramsey kind of thought process into it when looking at paying off the one that's going to bring the most satisfaction. And in this case, it's going to save you the most amount of money in dealing with that first.
Yeah. No, and that's my Dave Ramsey kind of guy. And the snowball, right? And so, because the problem is, and we even started to see this a little bit when we were just throwing out numbers to it, is that the problem is if we identify everything as the biggest risk and the biggest problem, then what we're going to find ourselves doing in our companies is we're going to be trying to do everything at once. As it turns out, we don't have time. We don't have the resources to do that. None of us have the resources to do this. So we'll make this an action item list thing, and/or / a homework assignment is, at least from some of you, I'd like to see you go back and take this risk matrix and over the next week and try using it in your company. It doesn't have to be 27 things. It could be 10 things. And plug them in and go through the exercise to help give you some focus about where you should be allocating time and money. Because right now, and this was part of the reason I wanted to bring this in a couple of weeks ago, was the thing I was hearing most from contractors a few weeks ago is, Kirk, we're so busy just staying alive, finding masks and things like that we haven't had time to think about this. Well, this is a tool to get you to think about, okay, now we got to Now we're going to move above this a little bit and start to think about those kinds of things. So, so that's why I want to bring that into the discussion tonight. Okay, so that's some thinking about risk management. Now I'm going to ask you all to do something. Is in front of you, either on your computer or a piece of paper, or if we have to, we'll do it just off the top of your head. Take it just a minute. I want you to make a short list of the activities the additional activities you're doing now on jobs, especially relative to COVID, that you weren't doing before this. And so specific activities. So the things that come to mind is, hand washing, but now I want to know is, for example, is, are you having a specific number of times a day, tool cleaning, specific number of times a day, the temperature check. I want you to make a list of 3, 4, 5 or more specific activities that you're doing each day with each craft worker. So I'll give you 90 seconds to do that. And then I'm going to give you another tool. All right, so that's probably about 90 seconds roughly. So now I'm going to pull up a tool that John and I have worked on and for many years and are familiar with, and some of the rest of you may be, but I bet you half of you or so on the call probably haven't seen or used it before. This is a tool that we created, being PHCC, and I was involved in a program in recrafting a program called Understanding Overhead, and this was part of that as well. And so what you're looking at here, first I want to describe the tool, and then how we use it pre-COVID. And now I'm going to turn this into a COVID lost time to dollars spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and make some changes here live, although it doesn't like that. Excel doesn't like that, like we talked about. So COVID-19 lost time to dollars, and the way that the spreadsheet is set up, and it'll be really easy for you to use. Real simply, I've got 4 boxes. You can only fill in the blue boxes. I've got 4 boxes for you to fill in, and so the total number of employees that you have, in this case, we're talking about craft workers, and so let's say it was 50. Then your average fully burdened labor rate, and again, it could be 100, it could be 20, whatever it is for your company. And then total number of work days this month, total number of work days per year, and really it makes just as much sense to leave those 2 numbers there because they're the standard companies you'd use in the industry. And then what we have on this spreadsheet is 3 different sets of behaviors. And so universal time wasters, things like personal phone calls during working hours, bad or missing information, lunch over allotted time, etc. Then we get down into a second classification, which is field technician or labor-specific losses in time moving materials more than once, use of improper tools or lack of tools. And then the third category is other time wasters, ordering more materials than needed or warranted, starting projects before they're ready, etc. And so this is what I would normally use both with our company, but also with other companies, and helping companies to identify actually how much lost time that they typically experience in a typical work day. Now, we have good numbers for that in our industry, and so those of you who have had classes with me before, especially about productivity, know that in a typical 8-hour day, the typical productivity that we get out of a craft worker pre-COVID was 4.5 hours a day. We know that's true. That's a rock solid number in our industry. And so that means typically as an industry, we have, and this is working straight time. This is not talking about working overtime or shift work. In a typical straight time, Monday through Friday, workday. We know for the construction industry that we typically have about 3.5 hours of lost time per day. So if we take that, then we know that 3.5 hours converts to 210 minutes. And so right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and modify this spreadsheet, and you can see it on your screen here, is I'm going to say typical lost time pre-COVID. And I'm just going to go ahead and punch in the 210 minutes because we already know that's true. And so if you do that, if I have a company that has 50 men, that I typically run 50 men in the field, and if my average fully burdened labor rate is $50 an hour, then I already knew pre-COVID that my efficiency percentage of the craft worker was 56%, and my lost time was 44%. And if I have 50 guys in the field making, well, not making, but me paying a fully burdened labor rate of $50 an hour, then I know that my total dollars wasted per year is about $2 million. And my total dollars wasted per day is just under $9,000. And so I think everyone should have followed that. If you don't, then you should ask questions. But what I want to do, now I want to take this tool that we already use, and now I want to turn it into a COVID tool. And so go ahead and type these. And so you need to go ahead and give them to me one at a time. So give me one activity that you're doing now that you didn't used to do before.
Wearing masks.
All right, so wearing masks. And so I think that was Jaron that said that probably. And so Jaron, how much time a day do you have your people change their mask during the day, clean their mask during the day? So give me some insight on how that affects, how that informs lost time.
Well, it's a requirement to get on the military bases now. It's a requirement actually in Hawaii. If you're leaving your home,
yep,
you don't have to wear it at home. You don't have to wear it in your car. You have to wear it everywhere else. So I'd say it's not so much specific to the site as it is, everyone has to do it right now. But I'd say, it's at least a few minutes of tying, untying, adjusting, taking it off, refolding it if it's a bandana kind of thing, that sort of thing.
All right, and that probably takes place at least several times a day. Would you agree?
Yes.
All right, so let's throw some numbers out. Give me how much time a day do you think per man do you think we lose because of this?
Maybe 15 minutes.
All right, so I'll throw 15 minutes in there. All right, good. Somebody else give me another thing that we're having to do now that's causing us to have.
Kirk, this is Dustin. So in efforts to save on our PPE, we have done, not that we didn't do them before, but we have done more diligent JHAs. Okay. So we have our safety director go down and meet with not only the facility director, but the people that are doing the work. And we walk through the scope of work, we identify the hazards, and then we make an assessment on what actual PPE requirements there are.
Okay. All right, good. I think that's a good practice. Two, that clearly adds some time. And so just give me a swag on how much time you think that adds.
At least I'd say 2.5 hours. I mean, but with multiple people involved. So are we talking total man hours? Or are we talking?
Yeah. So that's not, and I agree with you. I think this is going to be probably more specific to specific individuals, but let's just amateurize it across the crew and give me a swag.
Let's say 75 to 90 minutes, man.
Okay. All right. All right, good. So somebody give me another one.
We're doing temperatures and recording it in the morning. So I'd say that the whole crew, as we're going through, it's probably 5 minutes per person. With the one person that's doing all the recording and temperatures, it's probably 15 minutes for them.
Okay. All right. So for the typical craft worker,
say 10 minutes.
How much?
10.
10. Okay. I'll put 10 in
average.
All right. Good. All right, excellent. All right, so we get 10 minutes for that. Somebody else give me another one.
Hey, Kurt, it's Joe from Boston. We had a client, a construction site that just decided to put in place that they're taking control of the temperature taking. They decided that this is the criteria. I have it, and I'll read it to you. Workers will pull into the site at gate A and park in the parking lot to the left side of the driveway. 6:15, an EMT is going to arrive, and they will begin testing temperatures and so on. Workers will line up in a designated area in front of the trailer, staying 6 feet apart. One worker will enter the trailer at a time,
Man,
answering screening questions and having their temperature checked. So how do we put a time on that?
yeah, I mean, that I think that's a good question. I think it's a great question. I think you have to, though. And so I think so I just typed in customer driven safety protocols. My guess, Joe, you're going to lose 20 to 30 minutes a day per man. What do you think?
I agree, because this is the GC doing this. Am I muted? Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. This is the GC doing it, and this is a site that will have probably, I'm going to say 100 people on it.
Wow.
Yeah. You got to stagger the start time for the trade so it minimizes your downtime.
We could probably do that, yes, but they're starting at 6:15, and knowing the contractors, they'll be lined up. Everybody will be there at 6:15.
Do you have a safety person you could put on site for the first week to actually calculate it? Record it?
We don't have a safety person. Not at the time. We don't have a safety person to do that.
I mean, if you could get anybody there and actually record it, showed up this time, took this long per person. I mean, that actual data, this is going to be a big problem, will be useful for you down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. That's why I'm bringing this spreadsheet to the fore, because everybody on this call, you have to collect these numbers because one, it's going to speak directly to estimating. Two, it's going to speak directly to, like where Stephen was getting at, is going and getting your owners if you're a GC or sub, or your GCs if you're sub, to get them to consider different ways of implementing their procedures, because the way you get people's attention is with dollars, right? Safety is the most important thing. And you know that I believe that, because I've said that since the beginning of this. But now we have to help people to change their behaviors by showing them the numbers, right? Somebody else give me another one. I actually do want to get more on the list here. So give me some more.
This is Jacob with Helix in California. So we've had to switch to, instead of having joint material carts, for instance, everyone's got to have their own and collect that material themselves. So roughly 15 minutes across a crew of 2 now added to our total time. So I think 15 total is probably fair.
So our own materials cart and handle their own material. So you can't have runners doing it for them, right?
Yeah, that's correct, because we ultimately determined a runner does that they're touching everyone at that point.
Everything. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So what'd you say?
I don't know how to put this in there, but we've been requested on job sites that we don't share tools. Yeah. So if someone doesn't have a specific tool, we have to take it out and clean it before we can transfer it. I don't know if that's a.
No, I think lots of people have that, and so I'll put down tool cleaning. Because I think most people have incorporated that. And in fact, like in Michigan with FZ, they're cleaning their tools. They're changing their masks 3 times a day and cleaning their tools 3 times a day. What is anybody doing that right now?
Yeah, we've got a similar requirement to clean tools and then shared workspaces at least once a day.
Okay. How much time do you think we ought to put in there?
It depends on the size. Per person, I mean, at least 10 minutes.
Go ahead.
I wasn't thinking about something I haven't thought about yet, but as lifts, I mean, you share a lift all the time with your other employees, you know. Think about that either.
Yeah, so I think that is a separate category because I think it's there's certain tools that you need to have to share, right? Let's somebody used an example a couple of weeks ago on one of my calls about two-man auger, right? How the hell do you do a two-man auger with one man? You know, obviously you don't. And so we'll call that tool sharing, I guess. And that probably would be less because this doesn't apply to all crafts workers. So maybe I'll just put 5 minutes a day in there or whatever. The other one I want to do is what are your policies on hand sanitizing? Do you have policies on hand sanitizing? Hope so.
We don't have a certain amount of times that they have to wash. We just make sure that every job has hand washing facilities, or we're setting up temporary mop sinks on the job, and then encouraging the guys that if they're handling different stuff to use the hand washing stations.
All right, so the rest of you, what are you doing as far as hand sanitizer?
So, Kirk, this is Brad with MSD. So we've issued.
I'm sorry, I missed it. Go ahead, say again.
Hey, Kirk, this is Brad with MSD. So we've issued hand sanitizing as frequently, but we've also issued 3 pairs of gloves to be used per day. And at first break, they change those gloves out, use a Clorox bleach solution, 10% Clorox and 90% water. We send an SDS sheet with that. And then at lunch, they change those gloves out again. They're initialing their gloves and then numbering them pair 1, 2, 3. Good.
I think that's one of the procedures I wanted you to pull up. Can you pull it up? Are you in Dropbox? Can you get in Dropbox and pull that up? Or you want me to pull it up?
I'll see what I can do here, Kirk.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and do that, and then see if you can do that, because I'd like you to show that. So that's what we're doing too, and that's what we're recommending. And so clearly that consumes time. And so how much time a day do you think? So you're doing three pair of gloves, so at least the 2 sanitizing states. Well, actually, you still need to do all 3. How much time a day do you think that is?
I would say 15 minutes per person.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's right. All right, so Brad's going to go ahead and still try to find that. You all get the idea. Here's your, well, you tell me, what assignment am I going to give you to do based on what we just talked about?
For us to check our policies and see how much time we're wasting in our day.
Yeah, so take the spreadsheet, which I'll put in Dropbox for you tomorrow. You shouldn't eliminate any of the categories we have because you do have lost time and all that, and add a COVID-19, and I hesitate to call it time waster, but lost time, COVID-19 lost time, and identify all of the activities that you're having your people do because of these protocols, and rightfully so, and then figure out what it's actually costing you. So now I'll go on the bottom of this, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out the 210 because we know where that exists. And so the delta here is 165 minutes a day, which is about a little less than 3 hours a day, which is remarkably similar to the numbers that we've been hearing. And so then your dollars wasted per day. Now this would be with my 50-man crew or my 50-man company. We've got 1,500 men, but let's say your company's 50. That means you're losing $6,875 a day just because of these procedures. Let me ask a question that I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Has anybody here in your company not yet calculated your estimated cost of lost time per day because of these procedures? Anybody willing to admit you haven't done that?
We have not.
Okay. You have to do that.
Yes.
Why, for everybody on here, why do you have to do this?
You're going to lose money on future jobs if you don't.
Yeah, because of where we're going next. One is because you have to start including the cost of these procedures in your estimate, which means, get back to Steve's comment about getting the safety guy out there for at least a little while, is like any other new cost, we have to identify what that cost is. we as electrical, when we switched from EMT to MC cable, there was a new cost, and we needed to figure out what that was. On the mechanical side, we went from making all sweat joints to using ProPest. We had to figure out that cost. Well, now we have to figure out what this new cost that we have in our company is, and you best get on it because it's costing you that money right now. And so, one, we've got to get historical costs and get into estimating. But even more importantly, you've got to develop this cost because you got to get back to your client right now and let them know that you have these additional costs and they're compensable. And I think using a spreadsheet like this is the fastest way to get your head around it and to start to collect those things. At first, like any other new cost, you're probably be off by some magnitude of scale. Well, who cares? At least now you have a framework that you can use, and so that's the homework assignment. There is to go ahead and start to collect that data. Is that a useful tool in doing that? Do you think? Somebody say something. Yes.
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 Thank you. All right. Thanks. All right, Brad, go ahead and take the screen. I saw you start to take the screen of your procedure, if you don't mind.
Okay, can everybody see that?
I can't right. Yes, we can. All right,
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the gloves, there shall be a 3-day glove rotation for all employees required to wear hand protection. Pair 1, first arrival to morning break. Pair 2, after morning break to lunch, and then pair 3 after lunch to end of the day. After removal, each pair of gloves should be sanitized and left to dry until the following day. And as I stated, all of our guys are initialing their gloves and then labeling them pair 1, pair 2, pair 3. So obviously when they start their next day, they start out with pair 1, pair 2, pair 3.
All right, good. So a couple things. So I like this, and that's why I asked you to show it. A couple things I would add to this, right? So this is your policy. Is I'd add to it the initialing, right? The initialing of the gloves, right? And then the other thing I would add to it is actually, so you say each pair of gloves should be sanitized. If I was going to continue to modify the policy, I'd say must be sanitized instead of should. And then I'd actually give them pictures or procedure on and what does sanitizing the gloves mean, right? So to one guy, it means wave the Clorox solution over it. Another one means actually put a container, put it in the solution, pull the glove inside out, do that kind of thing, right?
Right.
Take all of the guesswork out of it and show them exactly what they need to do.
Hey, Kirk.
Yeah, go ahead.
So to go along with that, my wife is in the medical industry, and they implemented something of that nature with face masks. So you have 3 masks that you rotate throughout. Obviously, the information provided says that the virus lasts 3 days, and then it's supposedly dead. So at that point in time, it's kind of one of those things that I'm thinking as a GC and as a husband and father that why aren't we looking at a 4-day instead of 3-day? So, I mean, if you're doing the 3 pairs of gloves, well, let's, 3-day gloves type stuff or mask, whatever you're doing and reusing them. Why aren't we looking for that 4th day to implement it to make sure that we know for sure that it's dead?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think that's taking a better safe than sorry approach, which I think is a good idea, right? What the rest of y'all think about that?
I think if you're doing the 3-day, the 4-day step isn't a big deal, right? I mean, you already implemented the 3-day. Why not do it one more day for the extra added safety? It's not very difficult to do.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, luckily the place that my wife works at, for example, I mean, they provide the masks, and it's why wouldn't you provide a 4th one to make sure that your employees are safe? Yeah. And that comes down to even us as GCs and owners or leaders in a build or construction company of why aren't we taking that extra step to make sure that our people are safe? my subcontractors aren't safe.
Now, the way I read that, though, it says 3 per day, not specifically one set of gloves for 3 days. Right, Brad?
Yes, it's three pair per day.
And then what? And so at the end of the day, what happens with those 3 pair of gloves?
As long as they're not damaged or holes, they'll get reused because they're sanitizing the gloves.
Not all of us have the Dustin Clark UV sunlight, right? But
yeah, baby, don't hate it.
I know, man.
So I would offer to Kirk and John and to all my fellow peers that a lot of the comments and questions have been around, and Kirk started out with this, that look at your risk. Do you not do it because you can't get a hold of the items, you can't get a hold of sanitizer, you can't get a hold of gloves? My own personal opinion to all my peers is that's kind of the chicken shit way out, and we as people, as good managers, have got to support the craftsmen, and you can't support the craftsmen any more than you can do ensuring that their safety. And you got to think outside the box, again, to what Nick was said. If you can't find the sanitizer, you can't find the gloves, you can't find then make them. We got a lot of ingenuity, you got a lot of bright people in this industry, and then you just get a couple heads together and just make it happen. I mean, that's how we've had to evolve over a lot of this. I mean, we put in order for thermometers, 3.5 weeks ago, and we just now got them. But we were able to obtain these, cheap tag ones for those people, unfortunate, that didn't have any. So I would just offer to the peers, guys, think outside the box, go out and make it happen. And that's what I have to offer.
Well, two comments to that, Brad. I agree with 100%. For me, that commandment number 1 is support the craftsmen in the field, and that's the first commandment in our company. And so I think that speaks directly to that. And I also, you made me smile, Brad, because I've been on my best behavior tonight, language-wise. And most of you know me really well and know that I'm usually a little faster and looser with that. But I have not said the F word all night, which I've never gotten through a 3-hour lecture about that. But I will endorse Brad's comment as no chicken shit excuses.
All right, so with that, no chicken shit
I learned by one of
excuses.
the best.
Why wouldn't you implement 4 pairs then of gloves to make?
No, right. I think that's the question. Is that
if we're trying to cut all the bullshit out of here, I mean, if we implemented 4 pairs, which I probably should be implementing the same thing. I mean, I understand why you're doing 3, and it's the same way with, like I said, with my wife. Why aren't they implementing 4 masks? I think off that everyone knows for sure that 3 days it's dead. You're not going to be touching the same things.
Yeah, well, Nick, so if you read it, they are changing them out 3 times per day.
Right.
Over the course of 3 days.
Yeah, and I get that. But even if you did 4, what's the difference? You start out with a fresh new pair.
I think you bring up a good point, Nick. I think that this is what's going on here. Is this is ongoing. So yeah, it might be 3 pairs a day, and you bring up a hell of a challenge. And why not? Why not 4? Why not 4 pairs start next week? And maybe things are maybe it goes to 5.
I don't want to take it to the ridiculous nth degree, but and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. But if you're going to actually follow Nick's logic, which I think is makes some sense, is what you really need 9 pair, right? Right. So so they're actually taken out of the cycle until 3 days later. Does that make sense? Absolutely. So, but I think these are useful conversations to have, to think about. What is your safety protocol? And it gets back to, where do you think, well, not only, I was going to say, where do you think you should fall on that? I think we all should be seeking what are best practices. And I think that's what Nick's saying, is that from his wife's experiences in healthcare, is it sounds like, you really should put the pool that's been sterilized away for 3 days before you touch it again. Right, Nick?
And I mean, I think you're doing a great job on what you're doing out there. I'm not trying to sound like an asshole on this one, but
I already know you are. You're a GC, right? So that's
I know. I really wish Darren would come in once in a while on that one.
No, she lets you take that heat. So
I know.
Hey, Nick, I'll say I do appreciate all the comments you've had in the past 3 weeks. I do think this is a time for us to stand up and to note that this industry isn't a joke. We do take this serious, and we are living to protect the people. And to Kirk's point, there has to be a fine line, because at some point the costs do escalate to a point to where it becomes unmanageable. But by all means, I encourage everybody to go above and beyond to assure that everyone is protected, because like I said in the beginning, I mean, no family is greater than any other. Nobody wants to be that owner that has to go and report back to that family member that somebody got sick on one of our jobs or one of our service orders or whatever it may be. So I appreciate your comments, and it helps us too. I mean, this whole thing is about being collaborative and working together and sharing so that we can learn and we can protect our organizations and we can move this industry forward.
I want to go along with that, Nick. I tend to play the bad cop a lot out of the GC. I'm not really that way, and I really want to make sure, and going through Kirk's class, to implement that we're a team.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if I don't have you guys as subcontractors, I'm not making money, and I don't have projects, and I'm without a job.
And who are you going to screw out of cash flow, right?
Exactly. And I can't screw the owners, and I can't screw you guys out of everything. So at the end of the day, I'm not playing golf and smoking cigars and drinking bourbon.
So you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong, but okay.
And
so it's a great conversation. I want to give you a couple of homework assignments, very specifically. And so I think it's incumbent on you to do this spreadsheet that we just went through. And so figure out, and this is what I want you to get to, is figure out your lost dollars per day per man. And so everybody go through and do that. And I want you to share that. Put what you came up with in Dropbox. Create a folder for yourself. Put it in Dropbox. There's no right or wrong answer, but I want you to identify for you what you're losing per day just for COVID procedures and other COVID inefficiencies, not in general. And so calculate that lost dollars per day per man, and just do it on a composite crew rate. The other list I want you to put up that we're not gonna do tonight because we're out of time, is I want you to take a shot at calculating your job site overhead per day, because then next week we're going to fully develop. I have a case study that I've written for this. That we're going to fully develop your cost per day that you're losing because of COVID, so that you can now get to your customers and start to sell that cost and start to recover that cost for you. And so I won't pull it up because I don't want to steal my own case for next week. But so when you're thinking about job site overhead, the conversation like I said, I had last week, where the person I was talking to said, well, I don't have any extended costs because I own all the trailers. No, you need to think like a general contractor. I mean, in a good way, is what are general conditions, and that is all of your job site overhead. So it's your office trailer, your haulaways, your storage trailer, your office furniture, your supplies, phones, copier, plotters, drinking water, pickup trucks, and all of their costs, including lease, gas, oil, maintenance, insurance, your Trimble, if you got a Trimble on the site, any communication devices you have, cell phones, walkie-talkies, then all of your project supervisory personnel are job site overhead. So piping general foreman, sheet metal superintendent, electrical superintendent, project engineer, project manager, and all of their affiliated costs. So their wage or salary, truck, phones, expenses, etc. I want you to calculate what it cost you per day to support the job. And so that's going to then lead us into next week into this case that I put together, where we're going to develop a case so that you can use it, so then you can immediately go back to your customers and say, okay, here's the compensation we need from you because of these things. We are all in this together, but I have these costs. You need to compensate me for these costs. That gets us full circle back to force majeure in the contract, but we're going to have a fully developed case. But the cost of admission for next week's case is you got to do those two things. You got to figure out what your dollar cost per day, lost dollars per day is, and then your job center cost per day. So come in with that, put it in Dropbox in your folder. I want to look at some of those. I'll look at whatever you post before next Thursday, and then I've got this pretty robust case that I go through, which then you can use as a model if you want to take back to your client. So, first of all, any questions on that?
Yeah, hey Kirk. So obviously I'm in a little bit different situation, but what we're doing is anytime, and I think everybody should be doing this for projects they're on or that we think about COVID, we log it because we're still working. So anytime a contractor says, "Hey, we might delay," or we talk about it, we log it because there's a chance we send it all to the owner to tell them to pay for it because all that time that we're spending, I wouldn't say this class, but talking about it with subcontractors or GCs or the owner or whatever, that's all COVID time that is not in our estimate and everything like that. And you wouldn't think it's a lot, but they have a daily contractor call for 30 minutes a day. I got 3 people who sit on that, right? So then we talk about it with our contractor. So anytime there's any meeting associated with it, it all gets logged.
Good.
And all that adds up too.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent advice, and I think you're right. It's eating up far more of all of our time than we can imagine. I like that. So anytime you think about it or talk about it, you log it. I think that's excellent advice. All right. So what we talked about tonight was we kind of caught up with everybody doing what's new. Talked briefly about the new jobs report and the reopening America plan. We talked about risk management, and we identified a risk management tool. And we've given that as an assignment to go and really look at your company and identify your risk and then prioritize them objectively instead of subjectively. We introduced a typical loss productivity time tool that we've used for years, but now we are adding some sections to it to include COVID-19 procedures and lost time. And then we talked about, and we began to have discussion about delays and a study. What other questions? I've been capturing at the end of each night questions in your mind that you'd like to talk about or you'd like to have answers for. Of course, as the night goes through, I write those things down. What else is just kind of a speed round of things that are on your mind that you don't have answers for yet, but you have questions?
We brought up the question earlier. I know there's risk. Performance bonds and bid bonds. I did send an email out to our bid bond lady to see what she replies with and how this is affecting. So hopefully I get that back and I can post that to the Dropbox, see what that's in Wisconsin at least.
Okay. All right, good. What else? I'm going to add to that because it's been on my mind because of some other work I did today for something. Is we're seeing that healthcare companies are just like many of your companies have reached. Many companies, and I've talked a lot about FZ because I work closely with them, is many companies have taken pay cuts, right? And so project managers have been cut, executives have cut themselves, and those kind of things. It's now happening in healthcare, which really seems horrific to me right now. But we're finding the healthcare groups are reaching out to the docs that are a part of their, part of the group, and they're asking the doctors to take cuts in their fees down to the level of around 60%. And if the doctors are not taking those cuts, then they're kicking them out of the network. And everybody here understands healthcare networks. They're kicking them out of the network, and that's going to end up costing you, if you have healthcare, or your employees, if you provide insurance, more money. Because now you're going to have even more of everybody's familiar with the situation where let's say you have to go to the ER and you know that the hospital is in your group and it's covered by your insurance, but it turns out the anesthesiologist is not in the group, and then you have that big surprise. More of that is coming, and the large health carriers are now going to their docs and cutting that. So a long-winded way of saying this is going to affect the cost of your healthcare insurance to whatever you're providing for your employees. So that's a big piece. What else is on your mind? Things that you want to talk about, things you want me to do some investigation or that you're doing investigation?
Kirk, I put some documents in there. I'm just kind of concerned about what will be the long-term mandates that will be implemented. Will duct cleaning no longer be a recommendation? Will it become a requirement? Will we see low pressure ductwork disappear? Will we see HEPA filters at every supply grill, especially in the healthcare entities or maybe your commercial mixed use office buildings? You talk about the projectile of the sneeze, how far that can go. What does that look like long term? What do we need to be prepared for? You're seeing, I think ASHRAE and PHCC has done an absolute phenomenal job. I went back all the way to 2018, and it's funny, some of these studies that have already been produced actually touch on a lot of these topics.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder, we talk about overhead costs and what we need to add in these estimates, but what other costs do we need to kind of be in mindset of? The other thing is, and Nick, I'll throw this back at you. What does modular construction look like? We've all done the med gas walls and your typical med gas racks, but I mean complete modular construction, building in warehouses to protect the safety of our employees, having zone stations to be able to implement the work. That's kind of where my heart's lying right now, as this industry continues to change.
Yeah. So let me jump in for that. Is that yes, we need to have a conversation on that because we've been ahead of the curve on modular construction, and I think this is going to be one of the excuse me, this is going to be one of the natural outcomes of this is to accelerate that further. So we're definitely going to talk about that in this program as well. And I do want to hear what Nick has to say as well, but we'll add that. On your comment, Nick, about HEPA filtered in every grill, duct clean, all that. Today I was reading an article and a recommendation that we all shift, from instead of flexible aluminum duct to flexible copper duct. And I don't know if you do anything with that. Do you do anything now with that product?
Well, the concern is we have a sister company that obviously produces sheet metal, and they're regional sheet metal up here, and the concern is will our machinery even be able to take the thickness of the copper sheets if that actually started to be implemented into the healthcare? And I don't want to be caught off guard with millions of dollars in machinery costs being blindsided.
Well, I think, but you agree that that's a possibility, right?
I do, because the antimicrobial, it actually gives off the gases. So if you're in a healthcare facility, you're giving off potential gases. So when you look at the copper, I mean, a lot of people put the copper sinks in outside ORs because it kills bacteria. So will ductwork follow the plumbing suit?
Yeah, I think these are critical issues, right? That can dramatically blow up everybody's cost. But what's the future look like? I like the comments because there are lots of comments on the mechanical side, but there's also issues like this on the electrical side too. So we'll bring those into, and I want everybody to add in on that as well. So, and I also put down supply chain. We haven't talked about supply chain, and I promise to do that. We just haven't done it yet. So, all right, with that, it's 10:05. I love the fact that you guys are on, and you guys and gals, and I appreciate it. I think it's worth doing. So we're going to come back again next week, and we'll start with the things that you've added, and then we'll jump right into the case study because I really want to spend time developing that, and then hit on some of these other topics as well. So, worth coming for tonight?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
John and I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
We really thank you. We really appreciate you coming. Remember, if you're looking for masks to get hold of us, John, do you want to throw in anything there at this point, like foundation or?
So Kirk has been showing some of the tools that we use in every single one of the Essentials of Project Management classes that Kirk covers. And there's lots more tools beyond that we've shared and had in those classes. So just be aware of it. There's a lot more where that's come from, and I'm sure Kirk is going to be sharing more, but that's the power of being a part of an association and participating in educational programs like those, is you get access to so much more than what you were expecting and what you came in the door originally looking for.
All right. Well, thanks, John. I'll stay on for as long as the last person's on, and so with that, go out there and stay safe and figure out how to make money and figure out how not to lose 2.5 hours. additional. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Kirk.
Next week.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Kurt.
Thanks, Kirk.
Kurt, are you going to post that risk matrix to the Dropbox?
I am. I'm going to put it up. I probably won't put it up tonight because it's about time to drink, but I'll put it up first thing tomorrow.
Appreciate it. I've got one other question for you.
Yeah.
Would you try to pass on the cost of those gloves to the owner?
I would, of course. I'm passing all these costs on because to me, it's for sure. It won't be the next time, but this time, yes.
The gloves is the only one I've pushed back on, only because I like to push back on something. Because I'd say that's a consumable. Your glove will last the same amount of time. If you wear it a third of the time, it'll last 3 times as long. That's more of a principle than anything else to see if it would apply other places. But I was just curious what your thought was.
That's good, and that's good. And ask that question next week after we fully develop the cost, because I do have an answer for it. Because I anticipate that question, so I do have an answer.
All right, I'll ask next week. Thank you.
Thank you. What else is going on, folks?
Hey, Kirk, this is Cody. I just wanted to introduce myself. Todd brought me in, and this is my first class, just kind of sitting in, just kind of hearing it, and it's very informational. I mean, tons of great stuff. I'm a general contractor, millennial, here in Dallas. Yeah, kind of new. Nick, love a lot of the things you say. I know I didn't really speak up too much in this because I didn't want to take up too much of y'all's time, but I just want to thank you guys all for just all this great information in such turbulent times. It's very helpful, and it's a good way to guide, kind of a good guiding light for me.
Great. Well, we're glad
I hope you're talking to me, Nick, on that one. And,
yeah.
Either refrain on that one with any hog hunts, turkey hunts. I mean, anything of that nature. I'm more than happy to come down to Texas.
Hey, man, we got so many hogs down here. I just got back from a hog hunt maybe 2-3 weeks ago. Didn't catch anything, but
that's where I was going with Nick Davis too. I know he has some big bucks down there. So
there's so many hogs, man. I mean, you just can't even kill enough of them. They fly around in helicopters and shoot these things.
I know.
All different times and stuff, but yeah, I thank you guys again though for all this. This whole COVID thing threw a hole. I mean, it just destroyed my momentum. So I'm just trying to figure out how to bring it all back.
What do you do down there, Cody?
I'm doing right now. I don't know if you guys know Massage Envy, big franchise.
I actually did one of those.
Yeah. So they're and this actually would really help you out, Nick. Maybe something to look into as far as marketing. But they're having to go through just a whole company-wide refresh right now.
Yep.
I was doing all the refreshes in Dallas, Houston, Austin. Got some big clients out in New York and doing just big franchise moves. And I mean, as you guys very well know, I mean, COVID hits everywhere, but it really affected, of course, massage parlors, nail salons, all those kind of industries got hit, if not the hardest, because nobody wants to touch those industries. So everything got put on pause. And speaking of, I forgot, it was about maybe the first hour in there about just about pulling out of contracts and things like that. That I had pandemics in the contract, and I mean, just kind of like all apocalyptic stuff. I haven't charged any of that stuff back to them as far as mobilization costs and
good luck
things associated. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get much with that.
I think you're wrong about that. I think you're absolutely wrong about that.
I mean, worst case scenario, I might. I don't know. I'm on the fence because I don't want to destroy the reputation I have with the client because it's
I would try, but they're tough. I mean, they're not tough, but
telling the truth never destroys.
To go their way.
Yeah, and I've been treading lightly. I mean, we're coming up now on the second month really on this, and I got some storage that I'm still eating for material that we're holding off because they canceled the last 4.
And that's where it gets a little different on it. I mean, it's a tough ball game being a GC. You got to play that good cop, bad cop with them all the time. I know Nick Davis last night. I can't quite see him. I have my picture, and he goes, "That's the same way I play with my GC all the time."
It's funny because
I'm running into it right now with a customer right now, and I'm not going to say the name this point in time, but they are very well known in the community that I'm in. And if you Googled where I'm at, you're going to probably figure out who that is. And, so we're doing work for them, and we've run into the same issues right now with, do we push on change orders? And it's minimal work.
Well, that's kind of the fence I'm in. I mean,
beginning of the project, I'm not gonna do it. Business move for me as a PM, acting as owning my own construction company. This is one that I'm not going to burden the very minimal cost of what I have to do.
Well, you got to just
eat it.
Labor.
You just got to realize that somebody's going to pay these costs, and it's either going to be you.
It is. Well, and you have a little bit built in, a little fluff here and there, and we knew it was coming into it. I got it covered. I'm not going to go at them and be like, here we go. And
that's a choice. Just repeat after me.
And yeah, it is. It's my choice, and I'm holding on to it.
I'm willing to give my profit.
Right.
Yeah, that is always the hardest part. I mean, you circle the wagons. I don't look. I'm so green to this thing. Just to put in perspective, I'm only 26, so very very young, and had a lot of fantastic momentum going with it. But from a contract standpoint, I'm set. I'm good. I know that I could easily go after it. I mean, they've agreed to it and everything like that. It's just a matter of keeping the relationship.
It's the same old bullshit we always talk about in our industry. People justify making less money to maintain relationships. There's only two reasons.
Oh yeah, I know.
Two reasons you ever get work: you're low or you're good, and you have all the power in both of those.
When you're young, when you're so early into it, though, it's such a thin line. I want to hit back in certain areas, but in order to stay so competitive.
We're getting to know each other. You know what you need? You need a good consultant to come in and help you.
Probably.
I'll do it on a percentage. I'll do it on a percentage, man.
John Zink, do you know anyone that could come in and help?
No, I happen to know somebody.
But even John or Nick Davis, how do you feel on that one? If you have a customer that you're trying to build a relationship with, are you going to throw everything at them on change orders?
No, I appreciate the hardball mentality that GCs have, right? At the end of the day, I grew up on the CM side, and I fell in love with the mechanical contracting industry, and I never looked back. And now I'm 12 years into the mechanical side, and I live and breathe it, right? But at the end of the day, to me, it's about people working together and being on the same page. I think Kirk is spot on, because it is about the relationships that are established based on communication being done up front.
Right.
It's tough for a GC or CM to get blasted with all these costs and never even be giving any type of a notice. Yeah. And now you're forced in a difficult position to go back to the owner to try to sell this. So my approach is strictly, and I came to I left TP Mechanical, went to MSD it'll be 3 years this fall. And when I came here, MSD was a plan spec contractor, nickel and dime, right pat, Air Force Base. And what I saw was we weren't diversified, and we had one tier. And when I broke this contractor down and I did an analysis all the way back to 2008, and I was actually disgusted. And what I saw was we've been bullied for over a decade, and the company struggled to turn a profit. And we just worked together and realized that we have to diversify our business. We have to develop true relationships. We have to understand that the root cause of solving people's pain. And that's what the world's all about. And and I'll be honest, like when I went to the PHCC training, I mean, Kirk kind of caught me off guard a little bit, because I was kind of offended. I'm in kind of a pre-con role, right? I got estimation, engineering, coordination, marketing, sales for service and construction. I've always been an ops guy on the construction side. I had to learn the service side of the business. And what I found with the service side of the business, I got to understand the clients in a whole different perspective because it was end user. And it took me back to the way I was raised on the CM side of the business, and I started seeing everything just connect, and everything started to make sense. And I walked out of that PHCC training saying, you know what, sales is not a bad word.
Yeah.
People need sales because people
Oh,
need
yeah,
their
definitely.
problems solved. And it changed the way I looked at things, you know, and it's amazing, man. There's so much. I believe in partnerships. I will tell you, I don't believe in the term subcontractor. It actually makes the hair on the back of my spine stand up because I believe in trade associates. You know, our partners are, I don't care if you're an electrician or a welder or a pipe, I don't care. But you have knowledge and you're a partner on making an owner's dream become a reality. And we're all in this together. But we have to do upfront communication. Otherwise, we put you in an awkward position. And then even worse, that owner has to go back and ask for additional financing when it's already been planned out what was needed for the project plus the 10% that they go for. And you know, you're limited. And and the other thing is I hate change orders. Change orders are nothing but a
They're the
distraction
worst.
for
They're the
the
worst.
objective.
Absolutely.
Hey, and just to interrupt you there, Nick, Cody,
Yes, sir.
pay attention to what Nick Davis is saying right now, because these guys are what makes us tick.
Oh, I've got almost 4 pages of notes just from what you guys were talking about today, and everything. And again, everything in this class, I understand it doesn't pertain to me, and that's totally fine. But you know, the nuggets,
it does. That's the funny thing, Cody, is it does, because at the end of the day, I'm currently enrolled in the class with Kirk right now, and Kirk is very hard on the MEP trades, and he likes to talk and he likes to give those guys examples as subcontractors on how to screw over the GC.
oh no, I saw it. I saw there's a little friendly banter. No, I see it, but it's
the best thing about it, and Kirk, this is to you, kudos to you. When I went down there that first time, I thought, this is ridiculous. All he's going to do is talk about how heating contractors and electricians and plumbers are the best and that screwed over. But then all of a sudden it dawned on me, you know what? This is going to be very, 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 like, more beneficial than me building houses and actually being out in the trade. Understand what subcontractors think here, because at
Trade associates,
contractor associates doing and how they feel about me being a GC.
Well, and it's for me, it's never about screwing anybody over. It's about, like Nick says, is that I'm a businessman and I expect you to respect me and I'm going to respect you. Right. And I ain't giving anything away for free. We're going to work together for the best end. And we're such a screwed up industry in that people play all these silly games. Sucking up to bad clients is not good business.
It is.
Screwing subcontractors is not good business. Or trade associates. All right, so what we got to do is just do the right. Well, you all heard me last week. Do right. Lou Holtz as a football coach, right? Just do the right thing, damn it. It's not that hard. And it all comes down to math. It always comes down to math.
It does. And like I said, that light turned on in my head. I'm like, this is perfect. I get it. But you have to be able to adapt as being a GC to understand what Kirk's saying and turn it into your world as being a GC sometimes. Yeah. Really, at the end of the day, it makes it even better that you have to think, okay, well, he might be talking more of a mechanical guy, but this is how I need to interpret it as a GC. And that, yeah. Cody, if you can get in his class, I would definitely get in there.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. The only thing I'll say to Nick is and I love having all trades, right? Because I think that's the right way to do it. I love having all trades. The only concession I have to make when I have GCs in the room is I have to talk slower and explain things.
Yeah, we're not really good at that. We don't really understand things too well, right?
And we appreciate that.
Exactly.
No,
well, I guess, guys, I'll take one more. I'm sorry, Nick. Or Nick, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I guess, like really the biggest thing. I mean, this. I don't know. My mind goes everywhere when I look at that unemployment number, and then I also know that construction is one of the first to get hit on any economic downturn. You see that hands down in the 2008 recession. But I guess my biggest thing, I mean, I'm trying to keep as level-headed in all of this, and I know those unemployment numbers are inflated. What, for someone who's new to the whole industry, and I got started at a really good time about 2 years ago when everything was just kicking and things were going great. But now it's kind of seeing like something like this where you guys have all been probably through that 2008 period and felt that. What got you through that? Was it marketing, or was it retaining and circling the wagons?
Well, Cody, I think the first thing off on it is that we're going through two different, I guess, quotes, recession. Last week, even Kirk brought it up. The 08-07 year was all based on really the financials of it. This is a complete different epidemic, quote, recession that we're going through. Construction wise, like I said, I think it was last week, we're not going to see this go really affect us until probably fall at the end of the day. And I mean, companies all went up and down at the time, that first one, because that was all based off of money. I mean, you couldn't get money. You had money out there and you had to pay even more on it. And that's what put a lot of companies out of business. This one has nothing to do with what you have out there for loans, what you're asking for loans, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah. But to your specific question, Cody, about marketing and selling versus circling wagons, it's always about marketing and selling. It's always about marketing and selling. Sticking with marginal customers and low profits is never the solution. And that's going to be part of this whole discussion in subsequent weeks. Everything's about selling.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what I was taught on. I mean, we're a marketing company that does construction. I mean, that's kind of how I've been running it from this point forward. I don't know. I've never seen something like this, and it's more of on a worldwide kind of scale of scarce.
No doubt. Well, but the cool thing is that the optimist in me, and that's been proven over the decades now, is there's going to be real winners as far as construction contractors coming out of this, and so that's the purpose of the class, is to be one of those people. And it gets back to a lot of what Nick Davis is talking about, is how is the market going to change, how are materials going to change, methods, safety protocols, and to be the one who actually delivers those solutions to customers the right cost. And by that, I don't mean what people typically think. I don't mean at the low cost. I mean the right systems for the building at the right price. That's always the answer. And so,
right. And that's as GCs, we need to start realizing, if Nick comes to us and saying, hey, this is what you need to do. This is the best application for the building. Have a good rapport with Nick to be like, you know what? Yep, that's the number I'm going to throw on it. Here's what I'm going to do to the owner. And Nick and I both have jobs, down the future. If it's a school or whatever healthcare, whatever it may be, but it's really going to change on how a GC looks at things on what a contractor partner proposes.
Associate. I got you. We're gonna stick together.
Really going through on it and laying it out in fine detail. And Brad, I just seen your picture pop up, and you're just like, well, here's your price. Well, okay, well maybe Brad's cheaper, and I worked with both of them, but Nick's really laying it out here. This is what I'm gonna go to the owner with. If we don't get the project, we don't get it. Sorry, Nick. Hate to do it to you, but this is what we're going to do. But at the end of the day, you never know unless you try.
Our job as partners is to educate the customer.
Exactly. And I'm, from your class, I've been trying to do that more and more. Even working with, there's been a little bit of kickback with subcontractors that.
We don't like to hear those words, those phrases together. Kickback.
Exactly. They're like, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
It's like, guys, I had a mason that he's like, well, we dropped below freezing overnight for the last 4 days up here in Wisconsin. Got hammered with snow. We got like 8 inches of snow on Sunday.
Yeah, more snow coming tomorrow.
We're not laying block.
Mm.
We're not laying block, but is there anything that we could do to lay a block? No one calls, we had the pre-con, it's like, hey, we're a team. Let's make this work. And it's really just changing the whole industry. There's a few guys, the majority of the guys get it, but just trying to get everybody on grasp of what's the end goal is.
Well, you know what you need, Nick? You need some bourbon.
Real quick, I'll just say this: when we go to market, we'll do plan spec, and I prefer negotiated private work, relationship driven. But there's times where good plan spec work will come up, and the drawings aren't done. The engineer didn't do their job. The engineers are even behind the MEP trades, right? So I'll take a plan spec, I'll convert it to design assist, and I'll offer some value engineering, some thoughts to be able to go back to the owner to try to make this dream become a reality, because the last thing anybody wants to hear is the project's over budget. It's not going to happen, right? And then my ultimate goal is to convert that design assist to a design build. We've had 2 scenarios to where plan specs actually became a design build because the engineer wasn't cutting it. And they were doing nothing but costing the owner and taking money out of the owner's pocket.
Yep.
And those good CMs worked right with us. They were partners the whole way, and they took those costs right to it. And you know who fought it? The engineer.
Of course.
Oh, yeah,
Have it
definitely.
in-house, and we were able to take it, and we did it, and the owner was absolutely ecstatic. Because
I hear you loud and clear. And that's why it's nice with, Kirk's whole teachings here, I guess you could say. About trying to be that team and just providing it up front. Be like, hey, this is my proposal. I'm working with Nick Davis. This is what we can provide you. We're XYZ more than what you're probably thinking, but at the end of the day, or we're XYZ under, whatever it may be, but just trying to show them, and a lot of times we don't see that relationship pan out. I mean, you get a few guys that are going to work with you and help you along, but they don't really set up from the get-go and be like, hey, here's the deal. We want this job. We're going at it hard. We're going to make sure you, I, and everybody else underneath us gets it.
Can I turn one thing though? So we got one contractor around here, and Brad's not a fan of him, right? We go back and forth about, we're trying to diversify and find these clients, and so I got one that I've done a lot of work with in my past, and so they told me, so everything they issue is plan spec, right? But the funny thing is I know pretty deep into the ownership at this organization, and their headquarters is here in Dayton. And they said I know that 4% of their work is actually hard bid. So why do they turn around and then try to get more than 3 bidders? Because if I see more than 3 bidders, we're out. Yeah. We won't do it because I'm not going to be a number check. I'm not going to risk our people's time, their safety, for low price. It's 100% against what we believe in and stand for as an organization today. Yep. And so
before you get too far on that, Cody, take note of that comment right there.
Okay.
So it's funny how it turns with this contractor though. And now I'm starting to see things 6 months, 8 months out in advance and actually being requested to come with proposals for them to team up with them to go to the owners. So now what type of benefit does the end user have? It's crazy. But when you give me 2 weeks to bid a job, I don't even know it's coming. If I'm running our business, if Brad and I are sitting here saying, you know what, we're planning 2 weeks out, we're failing at our jobs.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
that's a quick turnaround.
And that's tough on the GD part of it, is they give us this, all right, you got 2 weeks to bid this project out. And it's like, are you kidding me? I got to put umpteen amount of divisions together on this bid.
Yeah, that's.
And then I have to go through, God knows how many MEP guys are going to bid this project. It could be 1, it could be 15. Now I have to go through and make
Or you
sure.
could do a better job of creating a select bid list. No, I'm serious. Of creating a select bid list.
I agree. And I think we've come to that terms too, but obviously you get to that point where if it's a hard bid project, someone posts it out on some exchange and then they find out that, I'm bidding it. So they're sending out and you get just these random facts to go through with it. For the most part, we now do all of our bidding off of Procore. So we have our bidders list. If we haven't worked with you, you're not getting a bid invite.
And that's something I'm still worried. Speaking of just a preferred, bid list, that's something that I know it comes probably with time and kind of making those mistakes at first. In terms of a GC, I'm still very green to the industry, but I gotta say I do really much so enjoy it.
No, it's a great industry. No, it's a great industry where you
broken though, Kirk. I do agree with what you do say. It is timed. It's broken. It's very far behind as far as the technology curve and everything. There's a lot of innovation.
But we're the ones that fix it, right?
Sir, we are.
I'm only sending out 4, maybe 5 at tops per division. So if you're an electrical contractor and I'm sending out a bid, 5 guys are getting it. If you're the 5 guys that I have worked with or shown like hard interest in it, you're not.
All right. Well, John's wife's going to kill him.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much though for taking just this little extra time.
Hold on. I'm a huge fan of Kirk, but one quick thing, Nick, just to flip it. We should be returning the favor though too. So as I've learned the service side of the business, we go to our service clients, and then also we need a CM to come in to manage that project. Then we return the favor. So it's a two-way partnership.
Right. Yep.
But, Kirk, I agree, man. I appreciate you doing this so much, man. And sorry, the last 2 weeks I've been been upstairs by the kids' bedrooms, and my kids on oxygen. So I got the oxygen tank. I got kids running around. It's a hot mess. But I moved down to the basement tonight and. Just wanted to make sure I kicked up my participation, but I really appreciate what you're doing, man. John,
anytime you guys want to, Kirk, I'll put out my contact information on my Dropbox there. If you guys want to ever send me any questions, comments, concerns, I can play the bad cop, GC, good cop, or if you just need some information, Cody, on what your thoughts, what my thoughts would be, feel free to shoot me. I'm not afraid to voice my route you want me to go on.
Nick, you might regret saying that. I might be blowing you up, man. But
fine. No, just remember,
I'm kidding. I'll be respectful of your time.
Down there.
Yeah, no, I'll keep you in mind on those hog farms. Got some good land for that. All right, hey, thank you guys again, and I'll see you guys probably next
Cody,
week.
Send me your contact information, all right?
Yes, sir, I will. Is there?
Just text me. 765 532 6713.
713. All right, guys. You guys have a good night, and thank you, and be safe.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it, guys.
You have a good one. Thanks, Kirk.
All right. Have a good night.
In the basement, Nick.
Turn over the GCs.
It's all good. It's all good, right?
Kirk, enjoy your bourbon.
I'm going to, Brad.
Hey, Kirk, he's been using that in every virtual meeting we're in. He's like, what starts in B and ends with urban.
Baby, that's it. Every night.
I don't really do the bourbon thing, but I do the starts with R and ends with
Oh, really? You're a rum guy. You kind of look like a pirate.
Be from Ohio.
That's right, Ohio.
Oh, wait, Mike, baby.
Mike DeWine land.
There you go.
Yeah. Can't say much better than done shit down there.
Yeah.
I
you guys have a good one.
All right, you too. See you guys later.
Be Purdue, though.
See ya.
All righty. Everybody can leave if you want to talk to me, except for John. Nick, thanks again for everything.
Hey, no problem. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing down there. I really enjoy everything that's going on here.
You really sound like a Wisconsin guy right then.
I probably did.
I don't usually hear your accent very much, but boy, you hit it there.
Yeah, I know. I try to mess around every once in a while, but no, you're doing a great job. To be honest, I don't want you to get pissed off on the whole MEP type comment made there.
I think it's going really well, and I think no, I think it's going perfect. I think your level of participation is right on, and I think it creates good conversation. I think it's a real plus. So please don't change anything.
No, it's really nice to be the asshole of GC once in a while.
And I like that Jaren's kind of lurking. That's pretty funny. But now with Cody coming in, that'll be good too. And then Steve Bartram really really functions as a CM in most ways. Yep. So I think we got a good mix. I really like the team.
No, it was really interesting. Even that shift work that you brought about today. We have our what do you want to call our SWOT analysis tomorrow. It's kind of interesting to see what the people bring about. I brought that up, so it's just be interesting to see.
You should if you're doing your SWOT analysis tomorrow, you should stay up late tonight or get up early tomorrow and do that risk matrix, because that's all about risk, right?
I know, and I was actually looking because I know you put it in our Dropbox from our class.
I did.
Trying to find that damn thing, and I couldn't find that son of a gun on there. So I hope you get uploaded here sooner than later.
I'll put it up. I'll put it up tonight.
Yeah.
As soon as I'm done talking with John, I'll put it up.
Yeah. So, and John, thanks. Kudos to you. Appreciate you tagging along with Kirk on this. I know it's tough.
These are fun, and conversations make it fun.
Honestly, Kirk and John, you guys have done a great job. I was kind of hesitant with being a GC, but there's a lot of valuable information that comes about of it, and I like to just give that bad cop, GC input into it and see what people react to it, and just see what the subcontractors even react. If it was hey, we've done 15 projects together, what are you going to do on this one? And I'm looking for more and more, and I think we're starting to get that with the guys on the trades really starting to vocalize on what their opinions would be, and that's what's benefited me the most.
Good. Yeah, talking about it makes it makes perfect sense. So
yeah, definitely. So appreciate everything you guys are doing. Stay safe.
You
too. I'm looking forward to get down there to swing a few golf clubs. So hurry up and get this course going.
Well, we get some damn decent weather too. All right. I mean, it's crazy.
You probably don't even have any snow down there.
Well, we're supposed to get a little bit tomorrow, like an inch or two.
Oh,
up north. Well, northern India is supposed to get 3, but for this time of year, that's unheard of.
Right.
We don't live in the North Pole like you do, man.
Oh my gosh, we got dumped on. It shut us down up here.
Yeah.
So, all right, you guys be good.
All right, thanks a lot, Jack. See ya.
Okay.
Thanks.
That end record button.
Oh yeah.